Hi, everybody. This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles Stories of the Supernatural. And I hope you enjoy this new show, whether you're viewing it on the internet or listening to a podcast version of the episode. I do want to thank you for being part of my audience. You can also find links to videos or podcasts on miamighostchronicles.com, as well as where you can submit your story about any eerie experiences you've had, which I would love to hear about. Just go to the Submit Your Story tab. Please subscribe to our channel so that you receive notification of when we release a new show. And find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. This is where I usually live stream and where I give you a behind the scenes look at locations where new episodes are being filmed at. I also tell you about all the interesting guests that will be appearing soon on Stories of the Supernatural. I hope you enjoy the show, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi, everybody. It's Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, Stories of the Supernatural. How are you all doing tonight? Well, it's nighttime here for me, but anyway, I have interesting is, well, that's kind of an understatement of the word to be used for the guest that I have here tonight. Her name is Sonia Brosz. And Sonia is a Maronite Catholic, charismatic, visionary, and spiritual warrior called 44 years ago to the service of God in the field of exorcism and deliverance. With over 40 years of training and acquired knowledge in metaphysics, witchcraft, magic, and sorcery of all cultures and religions of the world, she has been an active consultant to exorcists of the Catholic Church as well as deliverance pastors and ministers of all faiths for over 30 years. She's the mother of two and grandmother of three. Sonia and her husband Timothy reside in California with their three cats. So, how are you doing tonight, Sonia?
I'm doing fine. Thank you for having me on, Marlene.
On the contrary, it is my pleasure. Um, Sonia, I'm going to ask you because, like I said, even before we started recording, that it's going to be such an interesting conversation with you. But I'm going to ask you what I ask everybody. What was your introduction into either the paranormal or the supernatural? Did you ever have an experience as a child, or what happened with you?
Well, definitely yes. I was born a charismatic. We have charismatics going back through our bloodline all the way back. I don't even know exactly how far. I mean, it's great uncles, great aunts, grandmothers, and all
Wow.
that. So I was really very aware, even when I was a little girl, of spirits and what was around me. Um, my first experience really was of God, and I was like two. I was 2 years old, and my parents were in the living room practicing hymns for church, and they had left the door cracked open. I was in a crib in my mom's bedroom, and I saw this light. I woke up and I heard the singing, and I saw this light against the ceiling and the wall. Of course, it was light coming through the door top, but when I saw that light, I knew it was God, and I just felt very comfortable, and I went back to sleep. And it was really, then it kind of skips to perhaps I was around 3 or 4 or something, and I saw the first demon. Um, and we grew up in a haunted house. My dad had bought this house from his cousins, and they had passed away. And when they did, they came back to the house,
Wow.
and
So they, in
I
other
never
words, they were still alive when they sold your dad the house, but then later on when
right.
they passed away, they this was, as far as they were
hmm
concerned, that was their house still, kind
That's
of.
right. That's right. And we never knew. My sisters and I, we never knew it was my dad's cousins. He didn't tell us that until we were, up in our 40s and 50s. I mean,
Wow.
yeah, disclosed, "Oh, you mean the ghosts?"
Uh,
He would never admit it when we were growing up, and we would always tell him, there's footsteps going up the stairs, walking through the, down, they come up the top of the stairs and then turn and go into the bedroom and then into the closet. And, you know, so even as a little girl, I used to try to fight these things, and I grew up a Lutheran, so I didn't know anything about fighting any kind of spirits. But I would just try to bless them. I would always try to bless them.
Okay.
And they just never really took the hint, So we all had to kind of struggle through that growing up. And but as I got older, I got more determined to fight, and so I started reading books like The Cross and the Switchblade, and from Pastor Wilkerson, and different things like that. And I would speak to any minister, priest, or pastor that would listen for 5 minutes to ask a question. Most of them just basically would give me this little pat on the head, and they would basically say, "Oh, that's not a subject that
I
we're
was
going to
about to say,
discuss."
yeah, they poo-pooed like, okay, like that's like, no, I can imagine, yeah.
Well, if I'd have been wearing one, they'd have handed me my hat and pushed me out the door. So, you know, as I got older and became a little more insistent, I basically had some of these ministers or priests and stuff. They would just turn their back and walk off, or they just say, "I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to hear anything about that," and they just walk off. And
Really?
yeah, so it was very frustrating trying to learn originally, because this was before Ed and Lorraine Warren wrote their books,
Mm-hmm.
or anything like that. In fact, this was before I think they even started practicing on the East Coast, because when I actually began practicing, after I was graciously taught, first by a Pentecostal minister, and then I started working with some of the priests, and at that time, then there's just me kind of in the heartland and on the West Coast, and then
Mm-hmm.
in Mexico. And they were on the East Coast, and I didn't know about them until I think when they wrote their first book. I think it was like Tales of the Graveyard or something like that.
Okay.
And I was shocked and stunned. I was like, "Oh my goodness, there's somebody else out here trying to
Yes.
do this work." But it was. I was just always very close to God my whole life, and so it just never. There was never any really other choice that I would even wanted to make. And even as the New Age began to come forward in the 70s, really 60s and 70s, not
Mm-hmm.
so much 60s. That was kind of more of a spiritual awakening type of a thing with a lot of kids and whatnot. But I went to Berkeley for a couple of months out there in California. Growing up in North Dakota,
Mm-hmm.
I was very naive. Things
Wow.
I'd never used drugs or alcohol or anything like that. So I went out to see kind of what things were all about, and I just realized it wasn't really my cup of tea. It just wasn't where I was at, heart-wise. And so, but I learned a lot. I went to a party with some friends. They said, "Oh, we all got off work. I was working at Whole Foods at the time, and they said, "Hey, well, there's this party, and it's kind of an open door party, so you want to go with us?" And I'm like, "Well, okay," So we all dudded up, and we get over there, and they walk up, and they cruise in, and I'm like at the bottom of the steps, and I was standing with one of the guys. He was a bagger that worked there with me. And I said, "There's something not right about this place." I said, I don't get it. I don't know what's going on here." And he said, "Well, let's just go up and we'll take a look." And I'm like, "Sure, okay." So we get to the top of the stairs, and there was, I don't know how many steps, but they were cement. and
Uh-huh.
and I could feel this energy just pushing me, trying to push me backwards off the steps. But we got up to the top of the door there, where the door was at, and there was a screen door on the door, but then the other door was wide open, and my friend reached over and he opened up the screen door for me to walk through. And as my foot started to cross the threshold, the door swung shut, just boom, right in my
Are you
face. I mean,
serious? What? You must have been
yeah.
okay. All right, this is not just a feeling now. This is
No, no,
officially I'm not wanted here.
yeah, it was like bang. And and just a few minutes later, about a minute or so later, this guy opens up the door, and I was just like, oh my God, this guy's a Satanist. And he just looked at me and he said, "You are not welcome at this party." And I said, "Stay with me. I don't really mind. I'm just happy. I'll leave."
Yeah, right. Like
Uh,
I don't want to be here anyway.
yeah, let's not pick a fight. I just want to, I just want to ixnay down the door,
Mhm.
down the steps. And so anyway, so my friend looked at me and he said, "Well, the other two people had gone in already." And he said, "Well, I'm going to go into." And I said, "Okay." And so he walked in and he told them that, what happened, and they came running out of the house, all three of them, and they're just like they couldn't get out of there fast enough, and they said, "You won't believe what was on the walls and everything else." Oh my God, it was just terrible. And I'm like, "Oh, trust me, I believe it. Let's just let's just go.
Yeah.
Let's, I think we ended up at a Denny's or something,
Mhm.
uh, having some food, but and just talking about that whole thing that was so bizarre. But that was really the first time when I realized that not only did I recognize evil, but evil recognized me.
Yeah, wow.
So yeah, from that point on, things got a lot more interesting. I say that lightly, loosely, whatever. Things progressed. Let's say.
Well,
um,
I mean, it sounds like and that was a real good distinction that you made that you realized it's aware of me. Not
yes.
that's just not it's just not me what I kind of like capture, or aware of. It's a two-way street. So that must have been a real eye
Oh,
opener.
it was a real wake-up call. Yeah, it was a real wake-up call. It was kind of like, I don't know if you ever saw that movie, The Prophecy,
Yes.
when the guy meets the devil and he says, "Leave the lights on, Thomas," right?
Oh my.
It was like that. When I first saw that movie, I just so identified with that movie because
Let me
I
tell you
just
something.
thought,
That was like,
isn't that
that
fabulous?
was like, because especially in movies, you always want the finality of the end, but that was so open ended, like leave the lights on,
Yeah.
which is like this is not over and done with.
No,
Yeah.
no, and I just, I really liked that movie a lot because I think and I forget his name right now. It's unfortunate because he's such a good director and screenwriter and wrote the story. But he just did such a top drawer job with that movie because
Hmm.
so much of what I experience is not exactly like that, of course. But I mean, it there was a underlying truth in that movie
Okay.
that I grasped. So and it really was the last statement where he said, "Well, maybe it's your faith. It's you have to be, as a man, this is all we have, and but with God, it's strong enough. And that's really something I've kind of stood on for years, and I still do to this day. Because truth is, I don't really know anything, Marlene. Um,
Well, you know
I'm
what?
not
And
psychic.
I think part of that movie, obviously it's a movie. I like it also, especially the first one. That first one,
Yes, the
what
first one.
what
Yes.
one of the underlying themes about it is that you almost see that there's this continuous war between good and evil that goes on
Mhm.
around people, and
Yeah.
sometimes they're totally unaware of it until it kind of like you know
Oh
drops
yeah.
into their lap, like what happened. Well, what would happen with the characters? Otherwise, it wouldn't be interesting. But almost like let's say let's use the character of Virginia Madsen, the school teacher. you know
Yes.
Here she is,
Mhm.
she's just a normal lady, she's a nice lady, she teaches children on a reservation, and you could tell she's
Mhm.
just she loves her kids, and then
Yeah.
everything just and this had been going around her all the time, and then everything changed when all of a sudden you get that awareness, or that time that she goes outside and the guy that plays the devil, Satan confronts her and
Yeah.
and it's
Yeah. And this is really the thing, is that I think in so many ways, this is exactly what happens to so many people. You know, a lot of the TV shows and whatnot that are on, and the ghost busting and all this type of
hmm
thing, they make it seem like, it's no big deal. We're just going to go in there. We're going to holler around. We're going to
yeah.
force these things to act or to talk or to do whatever, whatever. You know, I will say that if you've ever really encountered true evil,
hmm
you don't do that lightly.
Oh,
And you don't,
absolutely not.
you just, because, it just never really leaves you. It's like one of these things that you
Mm-mm.
cannot unsee, you cannot unfeel it.
No,
You'll never be the same.
no.
It, and every time I take a case, and I have quite a few cases going all the time, but I've had cases going for 5 to 7 years in some cases. There's still people that, but the it just never leaves them once they have something. It's
Right.
not
That
something
once
that's
it's that even right that
right.
and that's something that I think you pointed out as far as like a lot of these shows that people sometimes they go into some of these places and what's really there is either malevolent or diabolical. And somehow or other they want to be, they challenge all the stupid stuff sometimes that they do. And they, people are under the impression that that's it, I'm leaving, this is over, okay, it was great, wow, what a wonderful time. And depending on
Nope.
what you basically contacted or challenged to open the door to,
Mhm.
you might be through, but it might not be through with you.
Well, that's exactly right. You wouldn't believe how many phone calls I get from Ghostbusters that
Yes.
say, something followed me home, and now what do I do?
hmm
And as far as I know, and I could be wrong about this, but I think I'm probably one of the only people that sends out exorcised oil and salt in the country, that is actually blessed by a Roman Catholic exorcist, designated exorcist. I always make sure that I send that out. I have other blessed items that I send, rosaries, medals, all kinds of different things.
hmm
And I have instructions for basically do it yourself, or how to help
Right.
yourself with
Right.
these things. Because there's only one of me, and I just can't travel anymore like I used to. So,
Um, and I think
but
also, I mean, I understand that, as far as the intercession of somebody like yourself
hmm
that is got the experience. But at the same time, I also think psychologically for somebody that finds himself, for them to feel empowered, not to feel that helpless feeling,
exactly,
I think has a
exactly.
lot to do with it.
You know,
Uh,
and and I really wish people would quit blame throwing. You know, I wish they, you know, not, it's like if something happens in a house and it's like one person notices it and everybody else is like, either if they don't see it, it's like, oh, you're crazy, you're imagining this, you don't know what you're talking about. Or let's just say that this person, got into some new age stuff a little bit, or,
mhm,
into some spirit thing and this and that. But, the thing is, what they don't realize is that demons don't need an excuse.
mhm,
An excuse, They just need to take an interest in someone. And a lot of the time, the person might just simply have a very pure spirit. They may just
mhm,
have a very pure uh, heart and naivete and whatnot, and they're not realizing that they have a light, a glow about them
mhm,
that attracts, curious entities on many different levels. Usually, I don't really see in most cases that demons are the first thing that is attracted. demons get attracted when they notice groupings around a person a lot of times as well,
Yeah.
or they can emanate from a home or from a property, land, whatever. And there's so many different types of entities that we have absolutely no idea of what they really are. You know, I've probably read every metaphysical book I could lay my hands on over the many years, and I have like a library of 1,800 volumes plus.
Wow.
That was the last inventory, so I don't even know how many there are, but I study everything from symbology to you know, the cultural aspects of spiritualism, whether it's all around the all around the world, really.
Right.
So you know, it's an eye-opening experience how many different cultures deal with different problems like this. You know,
Well,
and
yeah,
some of them are
and
very
this is the
effective.
thing. You're absolutely right. A lot of people don't realize. Everybody thinks of it as from the Judeo-Christian perspective because of
Right,
Hollywood. You
right.
know, the priest and the rites of exorcism and the
Oh, the
Catholic
Bible.
Church. But you're
Yeah,
right. Even pre-Christian times, cultures from around the world or civilizations
exactly.
had some type of reference to dealing with this type of spirits, if you want to call them that.
Well, yeah. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't have mentioned sorcery and magic and
Hmm.
witchcraft and all that in the Old Testament. You know, I mean that kind of thing was going on back then, and a lot of these different religions and you know, early people, tribal people and stuff. I've never worked with any tribe that didn't have a long history of spiritualism, um, and you know, whether they were there's always a balance of good and bad. You
Hmm.
know, every tribe I've ever talked to, whether it's Native American or Maori or African or any of the groups that I've talked to and worked with, especially like the Latin American. I work a lot with the Latin American people, and I love them dearly because they're so committed to their faith. Um, but you know, whatever they're into, they're very committed to. So
Right.
sometimes it's the opposite that you're fighting, and they're just as strong in that too. You know, but yeah, you know, this goes back forever. I mean, it just wasn't just born with the Hebrew Bible. You know, it wasn't just
Hmm.
born with the original Bible. Um, and you know, but you know, I think people need to realize that there's a balance of everything in this universe, and if there's light, there's dark, and if there's good, there's bad, and if
Hmm.
there's, you know, true good, there's true evil.
Yes,
Um, so you
there
know,
is.
I just advise people. You know, people are going to be curious, and I'm not going to say they shouldn't be. I'm just going to say use a little caution. You know, use a little common sense. If it doesn't feel good to you, turn around and walk away.
Yes.
You know.
And it's surprising how many people don't follow their instincts or their gut or just dismiss it as their imagination.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
and it's like, I'm, it's like there's absolutely times that's exactly what you need to do.
Yeah.
Whether it's, you want to call it a
Well,
sixth sense or something on a subconscious level that you're aware of,
mhm.
that's telling you, like for like self-preservation purposes, get out of here. Um,
Exactly. Common sense.
yes, common
Yeah.
sense, exactly, exactly.
You know. I
Uh,
mean, that's kind of when you know you're sane. You know.
yeah. Yeah, and you know what? And the thing
You
is
know.
this, how do you know you dodged the bullet if you're not there to, if you dodged it? There's no way for you to ever, let's say, find out, well, did I do the right thing? Sometimes, yeah, you do find out for some reason later on. You come across something and you realize, wow, I'm glad I left that place. But there's other times that you follow a hunch
Mhm.
or your gut
Yeah.
feeling, and there's no way to ever prove that that was a smart thing to do, in the sense
Well,
that, but,
there kind of is because you're still here.
oh, right,
You
exactly,
know.
yeah, exactly, yeah,
you
you're still
know.
here,
You know.
or sometimes, like I said, sometimes events happen to other people that you realize,
Yeah.
man, I was there, or I did that, or wow.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah. wasn't I lucky that I turned around that day and went back home, or
Oh,
whatever.
yes.
Yeah. I mean, the thing really is that people need to trust their judgment a lot.
Mm-hmm.
They need to look more. A lot of people that don't trust their own judgment have, kind of a low self-worth, or a lot of times they feel inferior to other people, so they'll just kind of go with the group because they don't want to turn around and
Yeah, be
say,
the odd man out.
yeah, and that sort of thing, but I would tell them this: if you feel that way, you need to trust yourself. You need to trust
Mm-hmm.
your own judgment. You know, maybe it is just a fear and it's not a reality. But you're the only one living your life.
Exactly.
Every person on this earth has a different perspective of every single thing that
Exactly.
happens. So
Exactly.
you just need to trust your own instincts and your own personal judgment. If you're not ready for something, if you're really fearful of it, then either if it's something that you need to overcome your fear on, like for example, maybe a phobia of some kind,
Right.
that's one thing. But if it's something like this, where it kind of comes at you kind of a sixth sense sort of way, just follow your instincts and step away from it.
Yeah.
Because, if you feel that way, you should just probably
Right.
trust
There's
yourself.
nothing wrong with um
Nope.
but like okay, well, it doesn't make sense, or it's just my imagination. Okay, well, you know what? Maybe it's not your imagination. It's just something that you can't quantify because you can't. But in other words, trust your instincts. And we're not
Yeah.
talking like you said something about fears or phobias that, like, okay, I know I'm scared of this when I shouldn't. That's a totally different scenario. We're not talking about the same thing here. Um,
No.
people,
Not
and also
walking
people
into a swamp
underestimate their
because,
ability to be aware of danger on both on a physical and metaphysical level.
well, and a lot of that too is just the way they're raised.
Yeah,
A lot of cultures, there's a lot of cultures out there that once the Inquisition kind of happened, excuse me, Marley. Um, Once the Inquisition kind of happened and all of that, a lot of the churches really downplayed anything to do with the devil. They downplayed witchcraft. They downplayed all of that. They didn't want to talk about it. They didn't want it to mention it. They didn't. They never brought it forward, and so a lot of people never really learned what they needed to know. They would read the Bible and they would see the devil mentioned again and again in different things, but when they would go to, say, Bible study or whatever, and they would bring it up, a lot of times it was really dismissed out of hand, and the parents thought they were doing the right thing by telling their kids, well, it's just your imagination. You don't really, you're not, uh, don't let your imagination run away with you, this sort of thing. I mean, my dad did that to us, and then here we are in our 40s and 50s, and we're saying, well, the only thing that was really tough growing up in that farmhouse out there, because we were way out in the country on a ranch and farm.
mm-hmm.
We said we're the, and Dad goes, ghosts, and we just all stopped talking. It was like a little family reunion. We all just stopped talking. We looked at my dad and we said,
What?
you, what? What do you mean ghosts? You told us all our lives that we were just imagining all this stuff. And he said, I didn't know what to tell you. I didn't, he said, I couldn't explain it. And I always thought it was my cousins, and I'm pretty sure it was because they never harmed anybody. They just made a lot of racket. But he said, what was I supposed to say? you know?
Well, you know what? And yours is not the first story I've heard of stuff like that, that things go on, and then after everybody moves on and the kids have grown up, then
Mm-hmm.
people fess up. They had their own experience, and especially the parents will say I didn't want to scare you guys. And I think to
Yeah.
myself, you know what? That's pretty tough on a kid. When you're
Yeah,
like,
just you know, the parents really what they really should have done at that point in time was, maybe I don't know. My mom used to walk around the house in the middle of the night reading the Bible out loud, and when she did, everything quieted down. That was
right,
the
and
only
that,
thing she knew how to do. She didn't know anything else to do, but
and
she
it
was
wasn't that,
charismatic
and I'm
also.
thinking, you as a child, you're thinking, okay, something's
Mhm.
got to be going on.
Yeah.
Um, if my mom is walking around the house, not that she's reading the Bible per se, but it's like she's walking around the house reading the Bible, okay,
Well,
her intent was to deal with whatever was going on.
yeah, well, the first time I heard her do that, I think I was probably about 8 years old or so, and I asked her. I went, I, I went out to the stairway, and as Mom was passing the stairway, I, I yelled down. I said, "Why are you reading the Bible?" And she said, "Well, because I just think it's healthy for the house if I go and I read the Bible at night. It helps protect the house." And I just I knew instinctively what she meant. I already knew what she
Hmm.
meant. The next day, I talked to her and I said, "Well, thank you for doing that because it was really scary that night, you know." And she said, "Yeah, I woke up with kind of an unease myself." She said, but she never talked about the ghosts either.
Right.
But yeah, we couldn't even have sleepovers. They'd call their parents at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and
Really?
tell them to come and get. Oh yeah,
So this was pretty
yeah.
consistent then, huh?
Oh yeah, constant. It was
And what
constant
do you
every
think,
night.
looking back, what do you think was going on with, well, you later found out with your cousins? What do you think? Was it just that they were just, that this had been their house?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I think they were just reliving things that they had done in life and
okay. But it's still scary when you're a kid.
life. Yeah, the wife would she would be walking around in the kitchen at night, and the man would come upstairs, and I don't know if it was the husband or if it was maybe their son or something that slept up there. I don't know, but you know, I knew they weren't going to do anything to
Hmm.
me, but I also felt that them being there without me fighting them could attract us because that's when, when I was very little, I'd seen that demon, and I saw the demon in the coal room of our house. Um,
What?
yeah. So my sister, my older sister, she's 10 years older than I am. She used to have to take care of me a lot, and I suppose I was just putting up a fuss. I don't know what, and she threatened me by saying I'm going to put you in the coal room if you don't stop
Oh,
whatever it was I was doing. And so she did, and I was probably in there just for a few seconds. It's not like my sister was mean to me, but she pushed me in and she shut the door, and there were no windows in the coal room. Just a coal chute that had a metal door on it, so it was completely black in there. And I saw a figure blacker than that black at
oh,
the very end of the room, and it started to come towards me. And I
oh.
remember not making a sound, and my sister then opening the door, and she took me out of there. But I knew it at 3. I mean, I knew what I saw. I knew what it was. And from that point on, I didn't want to give it any excuse to think that it too could come upstairs or that it too could, um, be
And
problematic.
that's so you. That was the only time you encountered it. Was just.
Yep.
I imagine going to that room was not on your list of things to do. It was like,
No, no. Even though, there wasn't one of the girls, not even one of the girls that wanted to be in the basement by themselves. You know, basements, in many years later, as I studied physics and all of that sort of thing, whenever you put a wound into the earth, in other words, like a
yes.
basement is
Oh
like
my
a
God! Thank
hole.
God you're talking about that. Go ahead.
Yeah, you put a wound into the earth, and the earth is going to initiate a vortex to try to heal that. In other words, it wants to
Yes, it
fill that
does.
space, right? And
Hmm.
this is one of the reasons why you have so many spiritual problems around cemeteries, because you've got all these graves, and they're 6 feet deep. There are holes in the earth, and then even though you put a casket in, there's empty space, so to speak, somewhat in that casket. So the earth is going to try to fill that by using a vortex. And what that vortex is, that spins, it pulls in a lot of other maybe unsuspecting entities.
Yes.
Um, so you just get a lot of entity action around any place that has a wound in the earth, and whether it's a basement, and this is where I tell people to take the exorcised salt and salt down their basement and bless their put some of that salt in some water in a spray bottle and spray their plumbing pipes, use the exorcised oil to anoint their electrical box if it's down there, anoint some of the pipes, keep that stuff from moving, from pulling. So we shut down the vortex. So,
That
you
also
know,
happens, I believe, also when people dig wells.
yeah, well, absolutely. You need to, on the top of that well, you need to bless that well with exorcised oil, and you need to in most cases, putting salt there isn't going to help. But what you can do is you can put a metal, you can use super glue or whatever, and you can put a blessed metal onto that wellhead, and you can anoint that wellhead with exorcised oil. And that does stop a lot of the problems. And if you have a pipe coming from there to the house, you want to anoint that pipe, because that way you don't get the effects of whatever's being pulled into that vortex coming through that pipe into the house. I
Right.
handled a case like that just this year in Connecticut, where it was definitely coming up from the well into the home, and the whole family was just scared out of their wits.
Sure. And I tell everybody, yeah, well, here in South Florida, we don't have basements because there's just it's
Right. To
the soil is
by
we have
water table.
right. It's
Yeah.
it's it's we have like coral stone and limestone. You just can't dig. You'd be like digging for like 3 months to dig a basement. So it's not. You
That's
don't
the
have
truth.
it, but you hear all the time of every almost every story I've ever come across that have to do. There's something always creepy going on in the basement, and it's like this is no
Yeah.
coincidence, folks.
No.
Um,
Yeah. That's the thing. I when I was about 18, I did my first vision quest with Frank Foolscrow. Because he lived right down in Bear Butte, in South Dakota, and we were right on the southwestern edge of North Dakota, so we were very close to South Dakota. And my mom was on the Civil Rights Commission for North Dakota, and so she had met him, and so anyway, she took me down, and she had some business down there, and she introduced me to him. And he asked Mom, he said, if your daughter's interested, he said, she might want to come back when she's 18 and do a vision quest with me. I actually really never really heard of a vision quest. She didn't really know what that
okay.
was, but Frank was such an upstanding person. He was so kind, and you could just feel the really beautiful energy around him that was really phenomenal. And I'm like pulling on her sleeve, going, yeah, 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 yeah. I want to come. You know. So when I was 18, that's what I did, and that was a very illuminating experience because, I don't remember everything he taught me that day, but I remember the one thing he told me was that wherever there were wounds in the earth, and whether they were natural from an earthquake or whatever, that those were power spots. He told me they were all power spots because the earth was pulling. It would try to pull energy in to fill those cracks or those holes or those
Mm-hmm.
um, areas. And as I got older and I began to study things like physics and whatnot, it made so much sense to me that that's what was happening on a metaphysical level.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And people
but
don't
yeah, it's
realize that. And a lot of these really, some of these houses sometimes also that are bigger. I mean, if they've got caverns or mines or anything underneath them,
oh yeah,
that's
we
like that's where you get neighborhoods that sometimes it's like, yeah, everybody on the block is having oh yeah, yeah, because they used to have some mines shafts running all along
yep.
underneath the town. It's like, there you go.
Yeah, you get up and you come out. You go out to go to work and you open your. Now this really happened. You got to go to work and you open up your garage door and your car is halfway in a sinkhole
Oh
because of the
yes,
mine shaft below it.
yes.
Tim and I actually rented a home in Colorado Springs, and it was right above this whole mine shaft area. And almost every neighbor had sinkage problems. This one guy, he ended up like I said, his car was halfway into the
I
sinkhole
can
in
can
his
you imagine you come
garage.
out and it's like where'd it go? Well, up in
Yeah.
Central Florida here, they've had problems with sinkholes. Exactly, that's
Oh yeah.
happened where people come
Mhm.
out and they've got a big giant gaping hole in their front lawn
Yeah.
and or in their street. Yeah,
Out here too.
yeah, it can happen. I mean, even without, I mean, without the benefit of mining is what I'm saying. That sometimes things like
Yes.
that do happen.
Yeah. Yeah. The watery road's limestone, and then away you go. Yeah, there's sinkholes out here all over the place too. I mean, I think that's just a natural thing. But I just I love walking. I just love the land. I love going out on the land and just being there and seeing things. When people call me out to do a house or whatever, before I ever do anything with the house at all, now I can pull the place up, the address or whatever, up on Google Satellite, and I can
Yes, I can.
see. You know,
Let me ask you something, Sonia. So going back to the story you said, here you are. You're kind of. It almost sounds like you're blossoming into your knowledge, and at the same time, you're realizing, well, guess what? They're aware of me. What happened?
yeah.
You kept on. How did you get into this? Because this is a very unusual work to be
Like,
involved in.
well, it was when I was working with the when I began going to the Pentecostal church.
Hmm.
Um, you know, there was a prayer service that night, and I went with my dad's the other cousins. These were live cousins. um, they were incredibly gracious people, wonderful people. And my son and I went to the prayer meeting with them. And I was watching the minister, and I was seeing what he was doing. And at the and I knew he was actually doing it. I knew it was actually happening. So he asked if anybody wanted to receive the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and I had read about that in the Cross and the Switchblade,
Hmm.
and I definitely wanted the baptism of the Holy Spirit, and so I went up and he prayed over me, and as the Holy Spirit just flowed into me, that's when my true gifts from God just really blossomed, and that's when I knew. And the minister knew as well. You know, he was over the next week or two. I met with him off and on quite a few times, and I started talking to him about my experiences. I realized he believed what I was telling him, and he understood it. And not only did he understand it, but he could actually guide me
Okay.
in my field of work. And so that was, I think that was really when I became truly dedicated to this work, and I was 29 years old.
And the reason why I say this, why I asked you that, is that just a lot of people that whether they go into some type of ministry or
Hmm.
whatever their religious beliefs are,
Yes.
but they shy away from this type of work as far as within their religion. Almost like what you were describing when you were young, that you would try to get all these answers from all these ministers. Makes me wonder
Hmm.
how many of them shooed you away, but in reality, they were kind of scared. Like this was, I don't want to go into that. And that's why I'm saying that in and of itself is unusual because um, a lot of people think that just because you're religious or whether you're a priest or whatever, that you're automatically going to want to do battle with evil. That's not the case. There's a lot of people that are
No.
very good at what they do, and let's say when it comes to ministering to people or helping them, or
Right. Hmm.
but this is like I don't want to have anything to do with that if I can help it.
Well, it's just not their calling.
Exactly.
It's not their calling. I mean, it's just like any other job. For example, I mean, you can be an office worker, but what are you? Are you an accountant? Are you, a treasurer, or are you a data, person? Are you IT? What do you do? Are you an office manager? Or and each person has their calling, so to speak,
Right.
or their gifts, their where they're meant to be. Um, yeah, see, I knew from the time I was a little girl this is what I
Right.
wanted to do. Um, but I've met with so many fantastic ministers and pastors and
Mhm.
priests that are true shepherds. I mean, they're true pastors to the people. They are very pastoral.
Mhm.
But this is a really intricate calling. There's so much you have to know. There's so much you have to learn. And so many of the priests like Gary Thomas and Chuck Kelly here and Father Sedano and all the different priests that I know that I work with all the time, they really didn't really have any knowledge. They just simply were asked,
Right.
will you go do this? And then their training began after that. And that's the way it is with most of the exorcists in the Catholic Church,
Yes.
and even in the ministry, pastoral ministry or whatever of the other religions. Um, you either have, if it's your calling, you're almost in a way, the first thing that happens to you as a child is that the discernment of spirits. You just began to realize that there are other things out there,
Mhm.
and then you're brought forward uh, as over the years, and so to do this actual work, I realized early on that I was really ignorant because I didn't grow up around any of this stuff. There wasn't
Right.
no we didn't have any metaphysical books in our house. We didn't have anything like that. And when I got to college, and I couldn't even believe there was a section in the in the college library
That had to do with stuff
that
like this.
yeah, that had to do with metaphysical stuff. So I started reading anything and everything I could find. Whether it was Rudolf Steiner or whether it was Madame Blavatsky or whatever. I
Mhm.
was like looking at all this stuff. The interesting thing though is that God would just I would read this, that, and this, that, and I'd know that was true, and then I'd read this other, and I'd be like, uh, that's bunk, and I just
Mhm.
put the book back on the shelf, So I would get a little wisdom out of each one of these books. They did the best they could, but you know, none of us is omnipresent when it comes
Well,
to our knowledge of metaphysics. When people say they're an expert in metaphysics, you just want to,
no.
honestly, I just take a
I
big sigh,
I think that
you know.
most people, especially, like you said, as far back, let's say, as Madame Blavatsky,
Hmm.
even the information that they have, they're always uh, affected by their upbringing, by their background, by the belief
Yep.
systems of that time period. Even if they,
Yeah.
she was talking about something that was really outside of the norm, but still, she was a product of her generation up to a
Well,
certain point and her environment and her upbringing. And I think
well,
that
and
that's why, and you made a good point that when you read all these books, sometimes you find something that's worthwhile, and then there's other parts of it that you go, "That's just not my fit. I don't, or that doesn't sound right to me."
it
And that's
just
what you're
doesn't
saying.
ring
Not everybody's
true.
got the 100%. The this is it. From A to Z. There's
Yeah.
a lot we don't know. There's a lot that we don't know.
Well, see,
Um,
the thing is, if you're writing a book like that, you know, you're going to open yourself to conjecture because we can't see what we're talking about.
mhm.
We know or we feel, we have certain instincts, we have certain understandings, maybe based on what we've read prior, that somebody else took the time to sit down and write the best they could.
Right.
But at some point, our conclusions in these books are based on conjecture because
Right.
the truth is we just don't know,
Exactly.
and that's that's the truth of it. We just don't know. I mean, I've been doing this work for so many years, and I can tell you right now, almost every single day, there's something comes up, and I have to say, I just don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know.
and that's and I have to laugh, Sonia, because believe it or not, there's a lot of people out there, so-called experts. I have a really hard time saying those words. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like someone ask
I know
me.
why.
I don't know.
Why?
I don't know. I can find out. I can, but I don't
You
know.
know,
It's
I
like
mean,
what's wrong with saying I don't know, especially about something having to do
I
with the supernatural or the unseen world, whatever you want to call it.
I know, right? I
Yeah.
mean, if your higher self is pulling down information,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we have the ability to soar out there and see things or understand things. A lot of times, maybe we don't even know we're doing it. Um, but do you have to say it's from some master, higher, you know, uh,
Right.
dimensional master? Just say it's you, okay? Just say
Right.
this is this is this
Not
is
as
what hit
impressive
me
though.
the other day when I was writing.
I have to laugh
I
because it's
mean,
like what is oh, yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
you know, it's just like a lot of these books, and they oh no, they're wisdom because they're channeled from this higher Akashic being,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just like, oh come on,
Yeah.
just just tell people this is what you were sitting down thinking about, and just put it down there, because when they start saying it's all channeled from this higher being or whatever, then in my book it should be all correct. If this guy or this thing or this whatever, if this person is the real thing, okay,
Right.
then what he's writing or they're writing that he's saying or whatever, it should be 100% correct. If it's
Yeah.
not, go to another being, okay? Because you're
Exactly.
getting that straight scoop. You know,
Exactly.
everything that I do comes from God. Everything I know that when I'm talking to people, not just like when we're talking right now, because I'm just being me and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know it all. But when God comes through me to advise a priest or something like that, everything that comes through me is 100% correct, or else I would not be considered a charismatic for the church. You
Right.
know, I'm not psychic. I can't think this stuff up on a dime. And believe me, God is much more eloquent a speaker than I am, and has just an amazing vocabulary and amazing knowledge and wisdom and stuff that comes through. And if the conversation's taped, I'll 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 listen to it myself later on and go, wow, that's
That
just
was me.
brilliant.
That was me talking.
It came through
And let me ask you something, Sonia. I was
my
looking
body,
at
but
that book that you wrote, The Curse of El Diablo, and
hmm
I looked, and this was something that you were involved with for several years,
oh
wasn't it?
yeah, 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 yeah. This was yeah, this was really something else. We a minister friend of mine called me and asked me if I would help him. He saw some things down in Juarez in this clinic that just my friend was a spiritualist minister,
Okay.
but he was a truly ordained minister. And he had a really deep faith in God. I mean, a lot of miracles happened around him all the time. He was a great guy. And he called me up and he said, you know, there, this place needs help. It needs help. I can't give it because I just don't know what to do. But he said, I really love these people and I really want to see them on a better footing, and I want this to go away, whatever's going on here. And so I went down and he and I worked down there for 10 days the first time. Um, and it just took everything I'd ever known, everything I've ever read, everything I ever thought of, and every bit of God's wisdom that he could offer me. Copious notes. I only had about a month or two to prepare for this, and
Mm-hmm.
the priest, my priest even told me, he said, you're not going to get any help from the diocese down there. They're not going to want to take this on. This is ongoing sorcery. It's ongoing magic. It's of the worst kind. Um, And
So,
he was right, because when I got down there, I contacted the diocese. I said, no, we don't want anything to do with it.
are you serious? But what was
Yeah,
it?
oh
Because it had
yeah.
been going on for so long, they didn't know how to handle it. They were scared. What?
Yeah, because the thing is, this was a fight between two brujos, and these guys were not just brujos; they were what Carlos Castaneda calls men of knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
They were true Toltec warriors. These guys were amazing. They had years and years and years of experience, and what they knew, they weren't like some Veracruz, guy advertising,
Mm-hmm.
brujo things. These guys were doctors. They were legitimate doctors, um, medical school, all that, and they were brilliant. And one was very jealous of the other one. They had been best friends, and then the Francisco, the one that his family that I worked with, he actually turned his life to God. He actually was exorcised from his demons, and he turned his life to God. And the other, and began to do incredible healings. And the other brujo got very angry and arranged for a way to kill him, and he did. However, Francisco, being an actual sorcerer, being an actual Toltec warrior, did not leave. His body died, but he was still there at the
So
clinic.
this
You
was
could hear,
really this was not like this is like
oh, is
I
it?
want to kill you, literally.
Yeah, I
Wow.
mean, they tried. They tried. While we were down there, they tried several different times to kill me and to
I was
kill
about to
Todd.
say, didn't you must have been
Yeah,
on the
no.
crosshairs?
Oh, it was terrible. I mean, Todd did end up dying from spiritual wounds that he received, because at the very end, we met the other Brujo, and he was perfectly possessed.
Wow.
And I'm telling you right now, that was, for me, the epitome of evil. I've never, in all the experiences I've had, there have been some really, really horrible ones, but I have to tell you, that was the worst. I was right in the same room with this guy, and he moved like a snake. He had this smirk. It was just unbelievable. I wanted so badly to just run. My human self did, but the other part of me that does this work, I just go into the heart of Christ, and I stood my ground because God was with me, because that was the only thing I could do. But and the only thing I was going to do, I wasn't going to run. But it was a really horrendous experience, and yeah, I wouldn't wish that on anybody.
Well,
That was
and
really something.
the thing is that because I'm sure that in a lot of many of the cases that you've handled, yeah, let's say you do have something that's dark spiritually, but you don't have
Yeah.
to be looking over your shoulder in case somebody wants to come and run you over with a car. But from what you're talking about here, you had it
Oh,
from on the
yeah.
spiritual level, but also on
Oh,
the physical, where
that's right.
that must
Yeah.
have been
Yeah.
what?
That's right. And that went on for years. I mean, it took me 20 years, Marlene, to write this book. 20 years, because I just could hardly get near the subject matter. I mean, I had put the whole story, I had all these notes, but I put it all on tape. Everything
Mm-hmm.
on tape. I used up, I think it was 7 or 8 120-minute tapes. I
Wow.
put that whole story on tape, and I did it right away because I knew I needed to write a book about this. I had no idea it was going to take me 20 years to be able to actually get that completely written.
And you
I kept trying.
did you understand that this what you were up against once you
No.
got there? When was it you really said what is going on here?
Well, right after he called me and I said, I wanted to say, "Oh, no way." I really did. I
Uh-huh.
wanted to run. And I opened my mouth and I said, "Sure, I'll come." And I was like clapping my hand over my mouth. I'm
Like
like,
what?
"What? Are you kidding me?" The only thing I did for read about brujos or sorcery or anything like that in Mexico at that point in time was
Mm-hmm.
in Castaneda.
Right.
And that didn't give me a whole lot to go on, you know what I mean?
Right.
I
Right.
was, and I don't even speak Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
So, even though I had worked with other people over the years down there and this and that, but that was small potatoes compared to this business.
Okay.
And so God just started filling in the blanks for me even before I even went. And I did a reading with this friend of mine. She was a Peruvian shaman before I actually went, and I put down I in this tape everything that for a fact that I knew inside that God had given me. I put it down on there, and while we were doing this, Our Lady of Fatima showed up behind me. And my friend was absolutely floored. The room just got incredibly bright. I could feel her hands on my shoulders, and Maria just looked at me like, "Oh my goodness!" And she said, "The Blessed Mother's standing right behind you." And I said, "I know, I can feel her." Um, but that tape came in so handy down there because these people were astounded. They're like, "How could you know these things? How could you know this?" And they weren't sure what to think of me, because I wasn't a psychic. Todd was psychic. I wasn't psychic. Um, but I just told him, I said, everything I know, God told me. And they asked me, "Why are you here?" And I said, "Because God heard your prayers." And then a couple of days in, as we were coming back and forth from the clinic, I told Maria about that tape, and this is different Maria Teresa. And I said, "Here's the tape," and she put it in, and we listened to it. She and I and Gloria and Todd, she played that tape going into Juarez, um, and that's the first time they heard everything. And that tape had been made like 2 weeks before. So, and everything on that tape was absolutely true,
Wow.
because Gloria knew everything. But yeah, it was. It like I said, it honestly, it took everything I'd ever known and more
That's
and
what it
more.
sounds like. And I mean, besides the spiritual danger, it sounds like when you're telling me right there that you were going to Juarez, I'm thinking to myself, she's brave. She's really brave. God. Because
Either that or I just lost my mind. Really, you
I
know,
was like, oh.
you know. This was before the cartel, so
But
it was
still, you know
1996.
what? It's still, even before the cartels, it doesn't really matter because, people sometimes is like, hey, if I can't deep six her spiritually, I'll get somebody to do it physically. Like I'm not going to take any chances. I'm gonna, especially somebody like you, who was more or less like the cavalry, was like, yeah, I got to get this, I got to get her out of the way.
Yeah, I just, from the time I told Todd I would come, I was never, I never thought twice. I just was totally focused on it. God was just giving me all this information. My husband, my kids were scared half out of their heads.
I bet.
They, my husband, I really think he didn't think I was going to make it back. He was really, really terrified of me going, and and Todd could sometimes be, kind of the will o' the wisp once in a while, and I'd known him for years, and there were times where he was extremely dependable, and other times when he wasn't so dependable.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband was really nervous because it was just
Sure.
Todd and I going,
I can, I can, I can imagine. That
Yeah,
must have
it
been
was.
nerve-wracking for your family.
Yeah, they were really terrified. They were very worried. And interestingly enough, I don't really think I was. I wasn't really worried. I was just, I was just hyper vigilant. I was just like I was on an adrenaline thing for 10
Mm-hmm.
days. It's just like I was so in God's hands. I was so totally in God's hands that whole time that I was so busy listening to what God wanted. And I don't hear him speak. I just know in my heart, God just says, "Do this, do that, go here, go there," He doesn't start words sentences with the words I or anything, and you don't hear sentences. You just know. It's like you need to do this and do that, and that's really what kept me going the entire time. Was I just simply listened to God. I didn't really put. It was like a constant 24/7 prayer, constantly going on in my head. So I didn't, I saw all these things. I knew what they were. I knew what was coming. I knew to jump and dive and move and this and that when I needed to. But, I just, truly, it was really God's courage. It was his strength. Um,
And Sonia, let me ask you something. When you did you ever have anything happen to you, let's say when you came back home that
yes.
because I was going to say I'm sure he just didn't do things when you were over there. It was like, okay, if
No.
I can just either scare her away or whatever he wanted, it's like I'm sure that
Well, I had to go back down a year later to do this formal blessing.
okay.
It was called a final blessing, really, because when we got there, the water wasn't running. There had been land movement under the clinic. See, they'd cursed this whole clinic. It was actually the prototype of the first Clinica de Esperanza.
Wow.
So it was 10,000 square feet. It was a big clinic.
Mhm.
I mean, it was like this big white shining clinic with these two bell towers on either
Wow.
side, sitting in the middle of Timbuktu. I mean, in the middle of the desert. The last thing in the world you'd expect to see.
Okay.
As we drove up, I was astounded. Todd made it sound like it was just a little clinic. It was just and we're driving along, and all of a sudden I'm seeing this huge white building with these bell towers and crosses on top, and this big giant, you know, in the middle of nowhere, and it was just in the middle of the prairie with some trees around it. I was literally blown over backwards, and I remember the one thought going through my mind was, my own personal self thinking to myself, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm scared to death. At that moment, I really wanted to just turn around and run. I was like, these are people's lives. There's like 85 members are better than this. These are their lives. They're looking to me to help them to turn all this around. And I'm overwhelmed by the sight of the building, much less anything else. And I just started crying, and I mean, just kind of to myself, staring out the window, and
And what was it
I,
that I mean, obviously you said that at one point they were friends, and then things went south between in the relationship.
yeah,
And what was it? The opponent wanted to shut this clinic down?
yeah, because when Francisco turned his life over to God, he really did so in a major way, and his all of a sudden even though he was an incredible healer before that, a holistic healer and medical healer, he became even more so. He was curing AIDS. He was curing many, many things. He had all these clients coming to him, and he had a consultorio in Juarez,
Mm-hmm.
where, excuse me, the bad cold, but where his sister and he both worked. And then he had the clinic out in the down in Villa Humasa.
Okay.
Um, and but he was just he this huge clinic. He had all these patients coming to him on a constant basis, and his fame was beginning to grow. He was invited to speak to the AMA about healing AIDS in San Diego. He began to just get all of these honors and all of this attention. And the other brujo, first of all, I suppose he felt maybe, and this is just my conjecture, but that he felt abandoned in their friendship because he was all geared into the devil.
Well, I was gonna say,
Uh,
yeah, right there. That's kind of like,
yeah,
hello.
yeah. Well, it's a real big separation of whole motives and morality and everything else. So I don't. He well, I think because Francisco was making so much money. He had so
Yeah.
many people, so many clients, and but at the same time, I don't know that this guy realized that Francisco did a lot for free. He didn't, he used to go down and treat the Tarahumaras Indians 2 or 3 times a year for free,
Mm-hmm.
um, and he did a lot of pro bono medical work around the area. So I think it was just the accolades
I was
that
about to
just
say that. I don't think
inspired.
I mean, besides the money, of course, it was the recognition that his
Hmm.
ex-friend was getting, and he was like, so now I'm a nobody. So, yeah,
Yeah, or whatever, right? Because what else would prompt him to
of course.
just to set up a trap? I mean, it was a perfect trap, and uh, and then when Francisco got really sick, um, then when Francisco tried to heal himself, the harder he tried to heal himself, the more things started to happen to his family.
Wow.
And he came to the consultorio one day to work with Gloria and walked through the door, and no one else was in the clinic, and Gloria was pinned up against the wall, 3 feet off the floor. She was pinned up there by a demon, and she was literally, I mean, her eyes were rolled back in her head, and her body was just kind of splayed out against the wall in contorted way. He tried everything to get her off that wall. He could not do it. And so he had to call his sister, who called her son, and her son came over and got Gloria off the wall, and then they took Gloria over to the sister's home, where she had to remain for 2 or 3 months.
Wow.
We did exorcisms and things over her, but even when I got there, she was still partially possessed. She was not completely free, and when I left, she was free. But it was, I mean, this was real stuff here. This was life and death, and the family, so many members were sick. Like I said, the water wasn't running, so they were actually having to pay people to pay someone else for irrigation water for the farmland.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Everything was just falling apart around them. And after we cleared that clinic, we cleared the clinic, the consultorio, and 6 different homes, ranchos and haciendas and whatnot.
So this was pretty
Um,
widespread then.
yes, this was a family of means. Originally, they were one of the top 10 families in Mexico, and they were very sophisticated, educated people. They could not. They knew what was going on, but they were just like so. They were at this when I got down there. They were almost resigned to their fate. They were so beat up and just exhausted from trying to fight all this.
I can
They just didn't
imagine.
know how. Yeah, but it was absolutely amazing. And then right at the end, after we cleared the clinic and everything, we had to get a priest in to bless the clinic before all these spirits came back in, because Francisco had collected these masks, and each one of these from all over the world, and he had worked with a holy man or a witch or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
a sorcerer, in each area where he collected these masks to implant a spirit
Oh
into
my
these masks.
God, no, he did
So this was
that?
Yeah, so this was done before he turned his life to God. So he was
Yeah, no, no, I
using
can
the
imagine, but it
power.
was like, oh,
Yeah. So he was using the power of these spirits to do his healing before he turned his life to God. After he turned his life to God, he took all the masks down in trunks. And some of these trunks would just literally vibrate. They had so
I
much
bet.
power. But we're talking thousands of masks,
Thousands?
thousands.
Oh
we
my
had to
God.
we had to handle each one. We had to bless it with the oil to seal the spirit into the mask until we could get it to a public museum. Because of going to from there to a public museum, then no one owned the mask.
Mm-hmm.
So when they opened the bag, the spirits were free, and they were able to leave and go back to where they came from without harming anyone.
Right.
So no one could actually own these masks anymore.
Exactly.
No, nobody in the family wanted anything to do with them. But they were in every house, practically almost every hacienda. The clinic had, I can't even tell you how many. El Diablo was the head of these masks. That's why I said the curse of El Diablo. That's the name of
Okay.
the
Now
club.
I understand why.
Yeah. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we had to get rid of all of these masks and all of the other artifacts that had spirits and things like that before we could get the clinic blessed. The interesting thing is nobody could go get the priest. We were done that afternoon. We were in a panic. Somebody had to go get the priest so we could bless the place, so we could seal it. And no one could go get the priest. We were 30 miles from the church, no phones, no way to reach him. And Todd and I were just desperate. We were looking at each other like, oh my goodness, this is all going to fall back in on us. It could kill us. We knew it. We were scared to death. And Todd took the last bag of masks off the property of the clinic and put it on the farmland. And a car drives up. And the driver of the car, who we did not, and here in the car is the priest and the Mother Superior.
Oh, are you kidding?
No,
Oh my God. You guys must have been
no,
like, all
right?
right.
And so
Yay.
this man that none of us knew had brought the priest there, and his name was Father Miguel. And he
Okay.
said, the Miguels, the Michaels,
Right.
we'd go to get chicken, and the guy serving us was named Miguel. Okay, it's amazing. But here's the priest, here's the Mother Superior, and the guy driving we didn't know, but the priest told Todd. So Todd told him. He said, thank God you came. That this is a miracle. And he's talking to him, and he said, what made you guys come out here? And he said, well, this man, or whatever his name was, he said he came and got us and asked me if I wanted to go see Francisco's clinic. And since I've never seen it, I said sure, and we all jumped in the car.
Oh.
So he comes in and he blesses the entire place, right? Blesses everybody, because the family, see, we did not know the driver. What the interesting thing is, the family all did. Well, the family, we were almost done with everything at this point. So a lot of the family members were at the hacienda, just an eighth of a mile down the road.
Uh-huh.
They all came at a dead run. I mean, some of these guys were in their 70s and 80s. They came at a dead run to the clinic. And so everybody was there. The priest blessed the clinic. He blessed everybody. He, used the frankincense, everything. He, completely blessed the thing and sealed it. And the chapel, St. Michael's Chapel as well. So this is all done. Everything's done. Everybody's just thrilled, happy, crying. They're just so excited. So Todd and I, we sit down outside on the portico with Maria Teresa and Gloria. And Todd is like, well, isn't that amazing? Who is the guy that brought the priest? And Maria Teresa looks at us and goes, excuse me. She says, you don't know? You didn't know who he was? And Todd says, no, I don't know. She said, you've got candles all over this place burning to St. Nino di Fidenzio, and you didn't know that he was the man who channels St. Nino di Fidenzio? And Todd and I'm serious, he could have just knocked us over with a feather. We nearly passed out, because he's a folk saint. He's a famous folk
Uh-huh.
saint in northern Mexico.
Yes.
And, yeah, and so this man was the channel for the St. Nino di Fidenzio, who
That
was
is
on National
incredible,
Geographic
Sonia.
and everything, healing people, right? So, yeah, we just felt, we were just,
So I take
that's
it then
when
that the archdiocese re-engaged.
nope,
They
nope,
didn't?
nope, nope, they didn't, no, no,
Are you kidding?
no, no. They didn't, honestly. They try not to get mixed up in the magic stuff going around. The priest had no idea. See, this is a cool thing about this. The man who channels the saint did not tell the priest what we were doing. He was sitting, he actually lived in Villahermosa, which we didn't know. He was sitting watching television, and God
So he
told him
just
to
came
get
out
up
there. He
and
goes,
go
"Oh,
get the
guy,
priest.
oh, you want me to bless the building? Sure, okay."
Yeah, he had no idea what
That's
happened.
great.
I know. So at the very end, they're getting back in the car, the family is like, "Oh, we want to give all these because these masks are extremely valuable. You know, they're all handmade and everything, right?" They
Mm-hmm.
said, "Oh, we want to give all these masks to the church, and you can sell them and make money for the church." And the priest is all happy. "Oh, yeah, that'd be wonderful." And I'm walking towards the car, and I turned around and I said, "No." And they said, "What?" I said, "No. You cannot give these to the church. This has to go to a public museum so that when they open the bags, the spirits will be free, they won't harm anyone, and they'll go back where they came from."
Yes.
And the guy who channels St. Nita Di Fidenzio, they turned from me to him, and he nodded his head that that was correct. And they
Yes.
said, "Oh, okay." And the priest looked at me, and I said, "They're cursed, Father. They're cursed. They all have spirits in them placed in there by sorcery." And the father's like, "Oh, okay, okay, yeah,
Yeah, I'm
okay, yeah.
sure he
The
did a real
museum's great.
quick.
You know,
Yeah.
the
Let's
museum's great."
right. Let's put
But
this in
yeah,
reverse. Quick. No, of
yeah,
course.
yeah. So it was
That.
crazy. I mean,
Oh, yeah. I'm glad because I was gonna say that would be like, who knows? Can you imagine this goes to the church and some
oh yeah,
bishop or
I think,
somebody says, "Oh, that's I'll just hang this in my office," and
yeah.
that'll be like a real
Oh,
conversation piece.
oh yeah, because these spirits, and none of these spirits were Christian. I mean, they were all, you know,
Right from around
I
the
mean,
world.
yeah, gods, goddesses, you name it. I mean, even the conflict of ego between the spirits in the building when we got there was so bad that you could hardly think. You know, we just, I just literally, had to tell the team. I said, we fully anointed ourselves before we went in, and I said, you just don't think. Just pick up each mask. Only Todd and I will pick them up, and we'll bless them with the Nomine Patri, et Filii Spiritus Sancti, and you hold the bags, we'll put them in the bags. And these guys were really gingerly holding those bags as
I
wide
bet.
open as they could so they didn't touch
I
anything.
bet.
And everybody had gloves on, sprayed with holy water and
Let me
everything
ask
else.
you something, Sonia. Do you think that because it sounds like, thankfully, this guy that, like you said, he turned his life over to God,
Yes.
but it makes you think also that did the family understand beforehand what he was involved with as far as the dark?
Yes.
Were they
Yes.
on board with it? And the reason where I'm
No,
going with this is that was this why it was so easy to also affect them?
they weren't really on board with it. The family originally came from Oaxaca, so they understood, but they did not like, they did not care for what he was doing per
Okay.
se. The fact that he was a medical doctor and he was doing a lot of good as a medical doctor,
Okay.
even before he turned his life over to God, was what they cared about. I mean, they loved their brother. He was an
Sure.
incredible man,
Sure.
But what he actually did with his work and stuff, they didn't ask too many questions and they didn't
Okay.
get too deep into it with him. They were very strong Catholics, all of the family.
Okay.
Um,
Because I was
yeah, but
wondering, like, how much did they understand of what he was involved with
I don't think
before?
much.
Because it's like one of those things, like in other words, making themselves easier targets.
No, no. I think the only reason they became targets
Mm-hmm.
was because the other Brujo, when he got rid of Francisco,
Right.
he wanted control of the clinic. He wanted
Oh, I
control of
bet.
the sister, of Gloria. Um, he wanted to be the top dog that everybody looked up to. So he basically cursed the clinic to the point where they could never really use it again. And the consultorio, he played being the good friend and all this. I mean, the family never suspected
That he was the
who
one
he,
behind the.
right, not until I got there. No,
Oh, you. Oh, he must have loved you.
he
Nah.
hated me.
Oh, I'm
There was
sure.
no doubt. There was absolutely
Yeah, you exposed
man,
him.
Well, and he had a whole clan. He had a large clan of And a lot of the students that had been going to learn from Francisco, which
Mm-hmm.
is the Medico Blanco, the white medicine
Mm-hmm.
of Brujeria, they had gone to this guy after Francisco died because they wanted to learn. But really, his was Negra.
Yes.
But he pretended it was Medico Blanco. So there were some of the students that didn't even realize that what he was like or anything else either. We didn't say anything to these people. We didn't really have to, because as we started to, as God would tell me what to do to back this curse off and this curse whatever, those curses were going back and landing on him. They were
Okay.
going back to where they had come from.
Mm-hmm.
So either him or his higher-ups in his group or whatever, the
Okay.
stuff hitting them hard. But
But
it was, yeah,
let me tell you something.
dangerous.
That's, if anything, I imagine that kind of like set the bar. I mean, I imagine you were like, well, I know that, like you said, sometimes you can't say I've seen it all or know it all, but after
No.
that, it kind of, I imagine you were a little bit shock proof. And it was like, okay, I've been through worse than this.
Well, I think the one thing that I was tested with the strongest during that entire time was learning how to keep myself in the heart of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
learning how to keep myself in into God's total control. Um, I just literally gave every aspect of myself over to God and did not take it out even to try to be my normal self, so to speak, in a way. I had to be extremely careful because they were just waiting for me to drop my guard.
Mm-hmm.
And God would tell me when it was safe to just, you know, sit back and talk to people and have a beer or whatever,
Right.
which was which was like at private homes that not any of the family, but the other friends that we were working with. Um, but I might have a half a beer.
Right.
I didn't do anything else. I was very, very tightly focused
I
the
can
whole time.
imagine you would, because
Yeah,
obviously, and I understand what you were talking about as far as being hypervigilant. That can be very
yes.
tiring also.
Well, this is the interesting thing. When I'm working with God, I am extremely hypervigilant, but
Okay.
it doesn't tire me at all.
Really?
I don't feel tired. In fact, I feel energetic. It was 103, 105 degrees of heat out there every day. Um, and I didn't even notice it. And normally, boy, I can't stand it when it gets really hot. And it was, I just kept going. I didn't even notice it. I felt good. I felt healthy. I felt strong. Everything. Um, I slept well. Ate well. They were wonderful cooks down there.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it was like God just kept me going. He just kept me in perfect health and everything else the entire time. So I didn't even, by that. I would have normally been flat on my face with sunstroke or something.
Well,
Uh, hmm?
let me ask you though, after everything, was there, let's say, because it sounds like you said this was a very involved case, was there a time when, let's say, you were, for lack of a better word, done with it, where you had to like retreat for a while, like for a respite, like,
Yes, yes, yeah. After that happened, because they kept trying to kill us off with spells and curses and all this, and I just was really physically ill.
mm-hmm,
Um, Not right away afterwards.
right,
In fact, a lot of God's just His glory or whatever just kind of hovered over me for like a week or two. But I knew I was in for it. I mean, it was just a constant barrage of curses and things. And when we went down to do the final blessing, um, they really went after me. It was really hard for me to even get down there, but I had to go down and do the final blessing. And
Mhm.
um, a friend of mine courageously stepped up to take me down there. So she and I and my son, we went down, and we had to release the allies that Francisco had stored in the second church tower. Now, these were not these trapped spirits that were
Okay.
in the masks.
Okay.
These were like the allies that a sorcerer collects in his gourd, so to speak.
Right.
Um, but he had stored them all in this one tower, and they had to be released.
Okay.
So I had to go down there and do that, and then, you know, clear, and then rededicate
Mhm.
the clinic at that point. And when we crossed the border going in that night, um, Todd had told them to change over the piping for the irrigation to a 6-inch pipe. They'd only had like a 3-inch pipe on there, and
Mhm.
it cost them $5,000 to do this. And here there was just a tiny trickle of water coming out, and they're like arguing with him. He said, "Listen, if you don't change this piping over, that piping there is going to get completely blown out when that water starts running." And he said, "You're going to lose all of your piping. You're going to have to redo everything, and it's not going to be easy." So they had literally trusted him at that point. So many miracles had happened around him. And they went ahead and they changed out that piping at great cost that they didn't really have, but they did. When we crossed the border that night, it was like 7 o'clock at night. And the next day when we got down to the um, was there, and he stared at, when we got out of the car, he almost fell over. He said, "What time did you cross? What time did you get to Mexico last?" And I said, 7 o'clock last night. And he just sat down in a chair and he said, "I was working over at the clinic at 7 o'clock." And he said, all of a sudden, he said, "I felt rumbling under the ground." And he said, "That water came flying out of there like a fire hose."
Wow.
And when we walked over to the clinic that day, you could see that water was just shooting out of that. And they had this big catch-all tank there that they built, like a small swimming pool type of thing. It's
Mhm.
like 8 feet long and 4 feet deep, 6 feet wide. And that thing, it was actually only part of that water was even touching that pool. The rest of it was going right into the canal itself. It was shooting right over the top of that. And but yeah, we when I that whole day, I just got attacked from every angle. I had the worst migraine I ever had in my life. We had this electrical storm that was beyond belief, and it was like after we released all these allies, their retaliation was to send these rolling clouds back, and this lightning storm just knocked out the transformer to the hacienda. It was banging around all these windows. I need to add that chapter to this book.
Okay.
Um, I didn't put it in there. I was going to write a second book about this because there's so much more to tell.
The aftermath,
But
in other words, kind of.
yeah, the aftermath. I just didn't have it in me at the time. Even to
Okay.
get this book published, I actually ended up in the hospital 3 days before I got the book published
Wow.
to finish the editing. But yeah, it was a fight the whole time. It was a fight all the way to getting this book published. But yeah, it was really bad. I mean, they tried to kill me. And when we left that day after clearing that place, uh, when we left, tried to leave Juarez, uh, we got followed, and they tried to nail us going home. So it was really pretty cool because the girl that was driving, this friend of mine, my best friend really, she flipped a U on the freeway. She said, "We are not going back to Dallas. We're going to New Mexico." And we went through New Mexico going home instead to throw them off, and made it back okay. But boy, I'm telling you, they were right on our heels the whole time.
That's
It,
what I'm talking about. That's what I'm thinking.
yeah,
I'm thinking, you know what, these people are not going to be content to just try to curse you or spend you, a
no, it
bad
was
luck your way.
no, they no, it was personal.
Oh,
it
absolutely.
it was
Oh, yeah.
personal, yeah. Yeah, we ran
In
for our
other words,
lives.
I'm sure that once they realized they weren't going to be able to scare you away, like in the sense of,
Mhm.
wow.
Yeah.
You're a brave lady. Very brave.
You know, I, I've always been stubborn. you know, I was born with red hair. I've always been stubborn. And my dad told me afterwards, it was funny, we were talking about it. My dad told me, he said, part of the reason you're a good choice for God as a woman, you know when to quit. I think he's probably right about that.
Well, yeah, that's sometimes, and I understand what you're saying. Sometimes it's one of those things that as much as you want to prepare or anticipate, it's something that when you're there, you figure it out when you're there.
Well,
And
yeah, yeah, because I had no idea what these people were really capable of. Truly,
hmm
I really didn't. All like I said, all I'd ever done is read. I knew some of the Castaneda stuff in there was kind of not real, and I even though I had known a lot of uh, holy men and stuff, I knew what was real and what wasn't, and you know, so it wasn't like I was taking everything Castaneda said verbatim either. I mean, I read them because God just was like, you need to read these. And I started the book out with that. I tell how I actually found that book to begin with, the first book he wrote. It was because Francisco actually appeared to me in this bookstore in Coronado Island, but he was already dead. I mean, he wasn't dead then. I mean, when
right.
this happened, this was like when I was like in my early 20s. I was 22 years old, and he appeared. I never knew his name or anything like that, and then he just disappeared, and it was weird. But I started reading these Castaneda books, and then I had dreams from that point on. Every once in a while, every couple of years, I'd have a dream about seeing this guy in the desert and meeting all these people. And the interesting
Wow.
thing is when we got down there, I never knew who they were. When I got down there, Maria Teresa was having a birthday party. I walked into her kitchen, and there were all these people that I saw in these dreams. They knew me, and I knew them, and we all just felt so completely floored. We're just
Wow.
like, we didn't know our names, the names, but they're just like, you're familiar to me. And they were familiar to me. I literally got weak at the knees. I walked in, I saw them all. I turned to Todd and I said, oh my God, these are the people I've been seeing in those dreams all these years.
Can you imagine?
And he just looked at me and went, what dreams? you know?
Yeah, what are you talking about? Sonia, do you think that if you would have known at the beginning when he approached you about what was going on over there,
hmm
if you would have known what was really, really, really going on, would you have gone? Or was like
I,
ignorance in a way a good thing?
I don't think I had a choice,
Really?
Arlene, because my first instinct was to say, are you crazy? I was going to say, you want me to do what? There's these brujos doing what? You want me to what? But we'd already had a bit of a discussion because he was going to go down to the Tarahumaras at Easter celebration, and I told him he had to be really careful. This again was God just coming forward.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you need to be really careful because there's a brujo down there that needs you for something, and if you don't agree, he'll take you over and use you anyway. And then he called me as he was coming back from the Easter celebration. Um, he called me first by radio phone from Mexico and told me, he talked for a few minutes, and then he called me again from El Paso and talked to me at greater length. But he said, you have to come down here because you're right about the brujo, but what he wants is not to do some harm or something. He wants to free his family. And I just never, I personally knew I was completely out of my depth, but I opened my mouth and yeah, I'll come. It just popped out there.
It's like, who was that said that? That wasn't me.
I'm serious. I literally clapped my hand over my mouth. I'm like, what did I just say? I don't know how to do it. What am I doing? But then it was just that fast. It just all the fear just exited, just left me, and I just started seeing it, so to speak, through God's way of looking at it, and it was like, okay, this is what I have to do. This is, I'm just a servant. I do what I'm told, and that's exactly what I do. And it's like
Right.
I just said okay, okay,
Yeah.
whatever you want, God, I'm going to do it, whatever you want. And I just trusted him to keep me safe and strong and do it, and he did.
No, sometimes it's true. It's like, what is it? Perfect trust.
That's really what it is. I mean, trust is faith. Faith is trust. You know, people say, well, I don't have any faith. I say, well, do you trust? Can you trust God? Well, yeah, but he's not here. He's on a throne somewhere. I said, no, he's right here. He's vital. He's alive. He's right here. And trust, if you trust him, that's faith. If you have trust in him, you have faith in him. So I said,
Exactly.
you don't make faith ambiguous. It's not ambiguous. It's very simple. It's trust. No,
Exactly. And sometimes no, it's true. It's like it's just at the very least knowing um that what is it, that someone has your back.
yes, yeah. Yeah, it's like falling over backwards, having somebody catch you.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Exactly.
if you think the
Exactly.
guy behind you is shifty, you're not going to fall.
Yeah, well, um
No,
and I mean sometimes I think that I mean there's nothing wrong with self-sufficiency, don't get me wrong, and
no,
relying on yourself and your abilities, but just like the situation that you found yourself in, it was like I'm sure that if you wouldn't have had that trust, that faith,
no,
either one, you wouldn't have gone, or
no.
two, once you went down there and you really saw what was going on, you would have said, you know what, I'm going back stateside. See you guys. Hope you work it out. Too bad. Bye.
Well, the thing
This,
is,
I'm not
Marlene,
staying around
honestly,
for this.
I
You
would
would
have
have
been
done
an
what the
idiot.
archdiocese did.
I mean, if I had gone down there based on chutzpah or ego or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, honestly, that whole thing not only would it have blown up in my face, it would have blown up in the face of all those people. You
Yeah,
know,
of course.
be, because they wouldn't have been content just blowing me out of the water for being an idiot. They would have gone after the people because they wanted them to cower in fear and desperation. You know, um, once I said yes to God, there was never any other thought in my mind. You know, did I realize that I personally was not suited or was not capable or knowledgeable enough and all that? Yes. I mean, I knew for a fact I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But
Oh,
did I know that God did? Yes.
right.
You
That's
know,
the thing.
yeah. Because no, I honestly, I would have just they would have just laughed me out of there in 5 minutes if I'd have gone there on my own, uh, you know, inflated sense of self. They would have, because those people were knowledgeable. They
Mm-hmm.
were smart. They were educated. They were knowledgeable, and they knew way more than I did about any of this stuff. You know,
Well,
because Gloria was a Brujeria practitioner.
okay.
So, I mean, she could have written books and tomes on the subject. So it's not like I went down there thinking I was going to out
Right.
knowledge any
Yeah,
of
they
them from
were. They probably
reading
understood better
Castaneda.
than you did initially exactly what they were up against.
Yeah. Well, I think I think what really drew them to my side was the fact that God just acted with so much power through me. You know, um, even for me, I'd never had visions anywhere close to the kind of visions I had when I was down there. Uh, I never imagined doing any of the things that I did down there. It was I would just know on the spot what to do. It was like I would just know, um, and not only did I just know what to do, but then as I would do it, this incredible power from God would just come through me and out, and just it was like slaying dragons.
Mm-hmm.
Literally. I mean, I had a vision of slaying this dragon, and I had this one guy interview me, and he said, "Oh, I read part of your book, and you know, those visions you had, they just sound like Kill Bill. And I'm like, I'd never. The thing is, I, I just thought never even seen Kill Bill. You know, I just wrote. I just, you know, I just wrote that in that book. I just wrote what happened to me through
Exactly.
my eyes. I didn't try to write it through Todd's eyes because I don't know how Todd saw
Yeah.
everything. I know what he told me in the snap, but it wasn't. I wasn't going to write the book for Todd using his visions of things because Todd was passed away. I don't have the right to use Todd's viewpoints of things,
Right.
you
No.
know, you know.
And
Um,
yeah, no, of course, absolutely. It's not a comparison.
I mean, yeah, really, could you imagine that? I mean, I didn't even know what to say to this guy. I was just like, what? You know, I remember just thinking to myself, you know, this guy kind of came on pretending that he really liked my book, or he hadn't even read it. He read a couple on the air.
Okay. And
Denigrate everything I'd written, and I just thought, no, I'm just not going to go there, you know. Um, but yeah, you know, I mean, you know, there's just some things that defy description. I mean, I wrote it, I read it, I I looked at it, and I'm thinking to myself, wow, did that really, you know, did that happen? I'm just like, yes, because those people are still alive. They're
right.
still
See,
there.
that's what I was saying. It's like one of those things that while you're doing it, like you're doing it. I'm here. I got to do it.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah,
that's it. Yeah. And like you said, you went and you took records. You were a good record keeper, so you could write this book later on. And I know exactly what you mean. Maybe when you were looking back at the events, you were like, I that was me. Yeah, that was me.
yeah.
I kept.
Well, before I even published it, I sent the galley copy to the family.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because you know I wanted them to know what I was writing. I wanted them to read it. I wanted them to say if they didn't want this mentioned or that mentioned. I wanted, you know, because it was about them. I mean, I didn't identify everybody totally clearly. I mean, their last names and all that. But the thing is, it still was their story. It was their family. He was their brother, their, you know, their uncle, their uh, grandson, whatever. I mean, these people had a right to read the story and see what I was going to publish before I published it. So I sent it to them. They loved it. They actually
That's
they
great.
actually took it. You know, they because it was all written in English,
Mm-hmm.
and some of them don't speak English very well. Miguel's wife was a teacher, and she read it to the ones that didn't speak English, and they actually came up to El Paso so they could call me and tell me absolutely publish it word for word. They said we really, really like that book.
That's
You
great.
know,
That's fantastic.
because I mean the family themselves, they were beautiful. They were dignified, lovely, wonderful people, and you know I wouldn't put anything out there that they might construe as
Well,
you know,
it's
you know.
looks like the what is it? They came through the fire. They came out the other end of that whole episode, which sounds like it was pretty horrible for all the family.
It was, yeah. They're, but I will tell you, man, they were absolute troopers. They were right there. They were right there. They helped. They did anything and everything that was necessary that we asked them to do, or that Todd asked them to do. Even before he even contacted me, he asked them to build an altar up on the hill facing the clinic
Mm-hmm.
and dedicate it to Saint Michael. He said, "Build that altar. It's going to be important later," and they did. They
Wow.
literally did. He got them to buy salt, that we could have blessed, and that we could, and they didn't just buy a bag of salt. They bought 25 pounds of it, because we had to do this whole perimeter around this clinic, and that's a big clinic. But yeah, you know, when Todd first met them, their tractor hadn't run for months. They were trying to get it fixed, get it working, this and that. And Todd just was out there, and he was listening to the guys talking, and he said, "Do you want me to bless?" He said, "Just a minute." And he went back to the house. He got some holy water. He came back, and he blessed the tractor, and it started right up.
Oh, wow. See?
Yep, yep.
Well,
Just it was one thing like that after the other, the whole time we were down there.
well, you know what? It's that people sometimes don't understand, especially when you're talking something like that, that's a practitioner in dark magic, exactly how much power they do have over the physical plane to do stuff like that, in other words, to get those types of
Yeah,
results.
I had no idea. I honestly had no idea that how these guys operated really, and the brujos and things. I didn't. I really didn't. I mean, I had studied a lot of things, but learning something in a book and learning it in
Oh,
person
yeah.
are two different
Oh,
things.
yeah.
What I read in the book was not even close to as horrifying as what I saw in person.
Well,
you know.
well, let's
Oh
face it,
my
I'm sure
goodness.
that there's a lot of stuff that they learned that's never been written down. It's almost like something you
Yes.
learned maybe as an initiate, but it's not really, you're never going to find in a book as to what they learn
No.
or what the initiation rites are,
Well, they
or
have secrets. You know. And not every single brujeria, every single bruja or bruja is the same. I mean,
hmm
they all teach different things. They all have different uh, abilities or things that they kind of center on and whatnot. And yeah, a lot of this is passed down knowledge from family or from friends or from
yes,
acquaintances, whatever. But I mean,
right.
there's no way in the world, honestly, that I could have done anything to defeat what had been done without God. I I can honestly tell you
Of
that I
course,
wouldn't have had
because
a clue what to do.
well, it sounds like that what was involved in that was really, really, really dark, Sonia. So,
Okay, yeah,
I mean, it's
it's
like,
horrendous,
I'm sure you know it
horrendous.
better than I do, but this
Oh, I
sounds
had
like
nightmares for years.
there's the in other words, that you had a person that, like, well, you said that was perfectly possessed, and what is it?
Yeah,
The ends justify the means as long as I get what I want.
yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, basically, you weren't even seeing the man because once they're perfectly possessed, the
hmm
demon is living through their body,
yeah,
through their
hmm
eyes, everything. Um, no, when that night, because her apartment, we were finishing up in Gloria's apartment above the consultorio, and when I heard the gate open, you had to come through this gate and down the sidewalk and then up these stairs to her apartment. It was above the consultorio. When I heard that gate open, I knew. I just stopped. I just stopped. I knew right away. I just knew it was the devil. I just knew it was the devil, not a demon, the devil. And I just, just stopped. I mean, moving. I mean, I just knew, and then I walked to the living room. Todd was talking to the ladies, and
hmm
Francisco's brother was there with his wife, and I just walked in, and I just stood there with my hands on my hips because he was coming up the stairs and he was coming through the door. And I just thought, oh boy, here we go. That's all I could think. I was just like, I just was praying
hmm
nonstop, you know, and it was just, all I knew is I had to stand. I had to stand my ground because, I knew I wouldn't be standing my ground alone. I could feel the presence of Saint Michael. I could feel the presence of Our Lady, and I just thought, you know, if I'm ever if I'm ever going to look at myself in the mirror again, I have to stand my ground right now and just, deal with this. And I tried to warn Todd, but I wasn't able to in time for him to understand because he was deep in conversation with these people, and this guy came through the door, and it was just, ugh, It was like that snake on Conan the Barbarian, where that guy
Right.
turns into a
Yeah,
snake.
exactly. At the end when he transforms it.
Yep.
But was this during the time that the family wasn't aware that he was the one that was doing this against them, or?
The only ones that really knew that was Gloria, and she was when she heard him coming up the stairs. She knew when she saw my face. She knew it was
Okay.
him, and she was scared to death. She ran back to her room to change clothes and stuff or whatever, just any excuse, because she just didn't want to deal right there. And she was scared to death. But she and the older sister, the matriarch, Esperanza, they knew. I had told them, and of course Esperanza, her husband. But it was really this guy, and nobody else. Well, Maria Teresa knew, but when he walked in, the look of shock on Maria Teresa's face was huge. Todd didn't even realize it was him because he just had his attention on other things, and
Mm-hmm.
but then when Todd looked up and glanced up and saw me and just saw this unblinking stare,
Okay.
he just
He was like, "Oh."
yeah, kind of red hair flying in the wind type look. I mean,
Uh-huh.
and he just saw that pose, which was not a usual pose for me, and I was just standing there, just staring at the sky, and just it was a kind of a eye fight. He
Mm-hmm.
was he was staring at me, and I was staring at him, and I mean, you could have cut that with a knife. It was just that thick, just that total. Because he'd heard all about us and all this, but he
Yeah.
figured it. He came at the last minute, then he could show everybody, you know, that we had no power over him,
Mm-hmm.
and we didn't. But boy, Saint Michael sure did.
I can imagine. That must have been like that was a you know
It
you
was
know when you see the
creepy.
westerns, the gunfight.
It that's what it felt like. It really did. I mean, only I have to say I wasn't thinking that way at the time. I
No,
was
I'm
just
sure. I'm
thinking.
sure. I'm sure
I
it's
was
one.
just. I was angry clear through. That's all I could do. I was angry. I was like, this guy walked in there, and it was just like every aspect of me just was filled with anger. I just, it was just like, how dare you even walk in here? I was just, just so angry. I wasn't going to, there was no way. I wasn't going to take one step. I wasn't going to move one muscle. I wasn't going to do one thing but just stand there and just challenge him. It was just, you know, uh, I don't know. I mean, it was an unusual feeling for me because I'm usually very upbeat and
Mm-hmm.
positive. But I just was not going to back down. Not then. I didn't care what he did. I didn't. It didn't even. I didn't even think about what he was capable of doing. I just didn't care about anything. I just was so mad.
Well, it's like one of those things that you said. This is going to set the tone for, if like I back down now,
Mm.
that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like,
And there was no back down in me. I mean, honestly, you know, if my ordinary personal self would have been trying to
right.
do this, it would have been another story altogether. I think I probably would have joined Gloria in her bedroom with the door slammed.
It's like, hold on, wait.
Oh yeah, because honestly, anybody with any common sense would have gotten the heck out of there.
No, it
But
really,
it,
I
but
mean,
I
a
knew
lot
it.
of people could listen to the story that you're telling about what you went through, but in truth, it's scary, but it's really, I get this feeling that of danger. It was like, it wasn't just, it was danger on all levels, is what I'm,
Yeah, it was like danger on a soul level.
uh-huh, yeah.
It was like soul. It was like every aspect of myself. It was like, it's physical and mental and emotional and spiritual and your soul and everything was engaged in that fight at that moment. It's like, and I just felt Saint Michael just kind of drop down over the top of me, you know, not like anything like that, but just like this, just huge angelic protection factor, and and at that point, then it was like this whole fight went on between Saint Michael and Lucifer. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't about me or about that guy or the body of that guy or whatever that this thing was using. It was about those two angels fighting each other, and it was just it was magnificent, but at the same time, I mean, it was incredibly scary. I mean,
Oh yeah, I can
but
imagine.
it yeah, because I mean, I myself was hiding on the inside of there and just thinking, like there was just this little aspect of myself that was kind of watching all this go on and terrified, and then but the other aspect of me was just all devoted to God, and it wasn't going anywhere. And you know, by the time Todd realized it, he'd been wounded already. This guy was just this Lucifer was just sending out these kind of like kind of like beams of energy, but
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't really see them, but you kind of knew they were like red or something. It's just like I don't know how to describe it. I tried to describe it in the book, but it's like and then the ones coming back from Saint Michael. I guess maybe just because we connect red with the devil and blue with Saint Michael, but to me it was like blue beams going back, and they were just
Wow.
firing shots back and forth. And I tried to step in front of Todd when he shot that one at Todd, and it bounced off of me, and it hit Todd in the head. And then 2 years later, uh, Todd's this guy hit Todd. Todd had a sinus infection, and he was coming up to our house for Thanksgiving, and this guy hit him in his left ear. And when he did that, he punctured the eardrum, and the sinus infection went to his brain. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, the next morning, they pulled the plug. He was brain dead.
Oh
But
God.
yeah, but where I was hit was in the abdomen. And the very same day that Todd got in this fight, I woke up. I had blood on my lips and everything else. I didn't even know I had an ulcer, but all of a sudden there was this horrendous pain in my stomach, and my husband rushed me to the emergency room, and then we found out that I had an ulcer the size of a dime, and it had perforated my stomach.
What?
Um, yeah, this the same day.
I was
So
about to
Todd and I,
say, and the timing on this is what?
yeah, yeah. So they went after both of us in the same day, and those through those wounds that we received that night in
Uh-huh.
that fight. So I ended up. They rushed me up, and this very beautiful Christian uh, um, doctor went in and lasered it shut, and he told me it'd take a year and a half to heal, and God healed it in 6 weeks.
Wow.
But Todd, um, but Todd passed away. Um, so they didn't even tell me. They wouldn't even tell me that Todd passed away until I got out of the hospital
I,
a couple days later.
that's understandable.
Yeah,
But
but
isn't that like think about that? I
oh
mean,
yeah,
I guess my point is, peop, people get sick and things happen to people. I mean,
yeah,
nobody, and it doesn't have to be the effect of something sorcery. In other words, is what I'm saying.
no,
But the timing on it is like
yeah.
that's very suspicious. Very suspicious.
Well, it absolutely is because, it literally was where I was wounded and it was where he was wounded.
Yeah.
And that was our weak point,
Right.
and that's where he attacked that day. And, you know, literally, God, God is able to save me. Um, but, Todd was weak. And not very well when he was there when he got to Santa Fe. And
Mm-hmm.
when this happened, his body just, couldn't deal with it. And I just, I just felt terrible. I mean, Todd was like my best friend. He was just one of the most brilliant people I've ever met in my life, and he was an absolutely astounding human being. And it just broke my heart. I mean,
I can
which
imagine.
I'm glad my family didn't tell me until I came out of the hospital.
Of course not. That's understandable.
But
It's
but
and it's one of those things that, I mean, you could go over it and you think, well, was, even though, like you said, that you saw, in other words, that you kind of suspected the source of it, um, but
Oh,
it's
I knew
almost
right
like one
away.
of those agreements you come to, I imagine, when you get involved in that type of work, that
Well,
you know.
you hear the exorcists say all the time that how difficult exorcism is because every time they do perform an exorcism on a true demon. I mean, when they actually engage and have to fight this demon, they say that a part of them kind of is taken,
Hmm.
is gone. But what I've seen is that yes, that can happen, but God heals that. He gives you that back if you last long enough. I mean,
Sure.
as long as you stay under His care, under His guidance and direction, God's healed me again and again and again. I mean, I've died several times on operating tables, and God's brought me back, and different things. Oh, I've never seen God not repair what was
Right. In other
wounded.
words, that
Yeah,
he's got your back.
yeah, you know, and it's absolutely true. I mean, I would not be here today if it wasn't for God's intervention on so many levels in my life. Um, Still doing this work. And it and
Yes.
you know, but yeah, it is honestly a calling for me, and I'm sure I'll be doing it until I
No, I'm
leave.
sure this is there's there's no like I'm retiring. Like there is no retirement, I think.
I tried that this year. I was going to retire. I
And what
really was.
happened? Didn't work?
No, not at all. I thought, well, I'm just going to retire from all these cases, and I'm just going to write because I want to write some books teaching people more stuff about what to do and how to stand, how to deal with all these different aspects of things, and what should they learn before they
Hmm.
actually get involved in this and that. Because there's a lot of, you know, very unprepared people calling themselves exorcists or
Yeah.
calling themselves um, uh, demonologists out there that
Oh my
honestly
God.
are
Yeah. I was
truly
like,
not prepared. I mean, I know a lot of them, and they've made some very serious mistakes. Others have managed to do quite well, but and there's some that I really, really like a lot and respect very, very deeply. Um, but I just think it would be nice to be able to put something out there that not like a handbook. I just want to put it in smaller, shorter books where they can look at first of all what pick up the book that speaks to them the loudest, and then
hmm.
from there go to the other smaller books to find out more about what they need to look at. So I want to make it affordable, just do it on
Sure.
Kindle, which my book is now just on Kindle. It used to be in print as well with
Just
Create
in
Space,
Kindle.
but yeah, it's on Kindle. But and I lowered the price on it. I'm going to probably lower the price again in a couple of months. I
Okay.
just want people to be able to afford it, or do some kind of
Sure. Sure.
giveaways or something where they can read it.
And
It's not for me. It's not about the money writing that book.
you know
It's
what?
really
And I was going to say something, Sonia. A lot of people don't realize that reading some of these books, sometimes it's not to reinforce that. Sometimes it could be an eye opener that this might not be
yeah.
the thing for you.
Well, that's the thing. They need to know the truth of what goes on out there.
Exactly. Yes.
It's not a game. This
Mm-hmm.
is not a game. This is not. You don't do what I do, thinking that you're it, that you know what you're doing, and that you're a star or whatever. The only way you can do what I do, and truthfully, and this is not an egotistical statement, but if you are not truly humble, if you don't truly acknowledge your limitations and what you
Mm-hmm.
do and what you do not know and what you can help with and what you cannot help with, and I mean, I have a lot of people I have to write back and I have to say, I'm sorry, this is just out of my purview. It's
Mm-hmm.
not something I can deal with. I have to say no to people that I would really wish I could say yes to, but
Sure.
I can't help everybody. So
Mm-hmm.
if you're not, ego is the antithesis of God. So if you don't approach this in a way that your whole life, your soul, everything in God's hands, if you can't do that, if you're too busy wondering what the camera's going to catch or what people are going to think or
Right.
whatever else, you're not going to survive it.
Well, you know what? I think some people think, and I'm going to say somebody that's younger, of course, that they look at this show like Supernatural and they see these two guys driving around in this car,
Hmm.
confronting demons, and it's like, that's make
Yep.
believe. That's really
Well,
make believe.
well, the one redeeming grace of Supernatural, which is actually one of my favorite shows,
Hmm.
um, and not because it's all real and everything, but because the one thing about these guys is that they never really act egotistical. They're
No,
always
no.
questioning what are they doing, what's going on. They're trying to get to the bottom of stuff, and they're trying to um, just do the best they can. And they know the risks. They know they're scared. They admit being scared, but they go do it anyway. So, I kind of take my hat off to that because I think that's probably what makes that show so endearing to so many people. You know, um, it's a lot of times it's public pressure or peer pressure.
Hmm.
A lot of these ghost hunter groups, they think that they need to know everything, or of course there's always some psychic with them that basically is supposed to know everything or
Right.
whatever. You know, so many of these guys call me and they ask me, well, what do you see? What do you know? Um, and I'll tell them probably something that either is like the exact opposite of what somebody else said, which I don't even know what they said because I don't ask that first,
Hmm.
or I end up telling them something that sometimes they just don't want to hear. But
Exactly. Doesn't fit with the script of what they had
yeah,
intended for that.
the thing is, you know, encountering real evil, if you're not 100% healthy, or if you're not fully in God's hands, it can leave you devastated
Oh, yes.
emotionally and mentally. You
Yes.
can get so depressed. You can get so wound out. You can get so exhausted.
Hmm.
These things, a lot of these other entities out there that are not demonic, they just really usurp people's life force. They just kind of feed on it. You know, they're attracted to this person or whatever for whatever reason,
Hmm.
and they just start, just drawing energy from this person. A lot of times these people think, oh, my spirit guides are what helped me do all this stuff. And then 10 years down the road, they look 20 years older
Oh, yeah.
and they have hardly any energy. They don't feel well. They're experiencing problems and they start coming to me and they say, or God leads them to my website and they find me. And I don't even advertise my website.
Hmm.
I don't charge for what I do. I don't advertise the site. I don't, I don't go to paranormal conventions and hang out with the crews and all this kind of stuff. You know, I, I mean, I've only talked to John Zaffis once or so on the phone, um, and he said, "Oh, I'm so thrilled to meet you," and I'm thinking, "What? I mean, I'm nobody. I'm thrilled. I was thrilled to meet him.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
yeah.
And you know what,
You know,
Sonia, what a lot of people don't understand about real evil, that the aim of real evil is corruption. Okay.
true. Yeah.
And even the person that thinks that they're badass or bad, yeah, it's like you really don't know what the depths of
Hmm.
corruption, true evil, in other words, what it does. And it's very subtle. And like you said, it creeps up uh, in different facets of your life, your health, all the things that normally um,
Right.
destroy hope in a person.
Yes. It destroys. It's like you feel like you'll never be happy again.
Hmm.
It just
Exactly.
sucks everything out of you. And a lot of these people that belong to these secret societies, and they're into all this magic, and we're talking grown adult people that you would never dream in a million years would be running around doing spells, wearing robes, and all this craziness.
Uh-huh.
But I'll tell you, these people, they really reap what they sow. They don't realize it at the time. They're after power, they're after money, they're
Yeah.
after control or whatever. They belong to these, old mystery schools or all these
Mm-hmm.
different things like this, and they go after people. But the destruction starts to happen with them, and it goes down through their family,
Oh, yeah.
and it can carry through with them for many, many years, and
Yes.
just ruin their lives, ruin everything about them. You
Yeah.
know, I
People
I
don't
see
realize
all this
sometimes
stuff.
that vows sometimes that you make or
Yeah.
your ancestors make do bind the family.
Well, they say, I've heard people say, well, God says that, he'll forgive the sins of the fathers and all this stuff and remember them no more. Yes, but that's only if they repent
There you
and if
go.
they confess those and they're
Yes.
penitent, truly penitent, then God forgives those sins and and he doesn't remember them anymore. But if they don't, if they're not penitent and they don't confess those and they just wait until they're dying and they go, well, I'm kind of sorry about all that stuff, let me go to heaven anyway. I don't really know how all that works. All I know is that there are still families out there dealing with the sins of the fathers, and there's things that come at them. And these are
Hmm.
totally innocent people. They have
Yeah,
no
that's what I was saying. Sometimes
idea.
they're unaware. They're
Yeah.
unaware.
And they'll call me up. Why is this happening to me? What did I
Hmm.
ever do?
Right. Yeah.
I didn't do anything. I wasn't into this kind of stuff or that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. Or why am I being, bombarded with this and that and the other thing? So
Hmm.
you kind of have to research. Sometimes it's just because the person is a really, really good soul and they're being
Yeah.
tested.
Yeah.
And other times it might be something coming back from lineage. Who knows? But
I mean, there's like, and I'm sure you better than anybody else sometimes know that it's a case by case basis
absolutely.
as
Every case
to
is different.
why certain things happen to certain people or to certain families, or
Yep.
sometimes
Every.
beyond one generation to the other. Sometimes it was something done on purpose. Sometimes it was
Hmm.
something not done on purpose, but still with the same result.
Yeah.
Um,
It
and
actually could be completely accidental.
yeah. Hmm.
It can be completely accidental. It's not. I never judge as to why it happened. I don't. I may look for the cause of it, but I don't ever tell people, "Oh, it's your fault because you
Right.
did this or that," because it is not for me to do that.
No, you're
Not what I do.
you're that
You
never
know.
that kind of
No.
blame thing that's not part of a solution of any type, especially if you're trying to
It.
help somebody.
No.
I mean, let's face it, that doesn't set the stage for
Oh.
like you said, especially I imagine, like you said, if people are contacting you when maybe they're at their rope's end or they just have can't
Yes.
figure out why things have happened maybe in their own lives or in their families' lives, that they're like, okay,
It,
I know something's going on, I just don't understand what it is.
well, yeah, and there's times where it's really not even spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that everybody's growing apart. Everybody, things are just falling apart in other ways. I mean, I do a lot of counseling with people, and there are quite a number of people that they're noticing things on a seemingly spiritual level because their own personal grounding or their solidness or whatever has started to show cracks underneath. So now they're starting to see the effects of it in different ways of disturbances, within their home or themselves or their minds or how they're thinking or whatever. But excuse me, goodness sake, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But the truth of the matter is that there's so many other ways that people's lives can be affected
Mm-hmm.
by just simply making wrong choices,
Sure.
or having choices foisted upon them one way or the other.
Yeah.
Um, we don't set the tone of the economy. The economy sets the tone of our lives.
Right.
Um, and, there's so many different things that go on. And so, you know, I just, you know, I, I guess maybe that's one of the reasons I made sure I was well educated so I would understand all these other factors.
Sure.
But, I think when it's all said and done, if you stay close to God and you really love Him and you commit yourself to letting Him drive the car, so you give Him the keys,
Mm-hmm.
let Him commit yourself to letting Him really guide you through your life. No matter what else comes at you, God will always find a solution for it. And it might be at the last minute, you know,
Yeah.
but He always finds a way to lead you out of that dark valley.
Yes.
Um, and I think of all the things that I could tell people, just read the 23rd Psalm, because where it says in there, He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me through this valley. He restoreth my soul. That's probably the most important psalm to me in the entire Bible, because it tells you, yes, you're going through all this, but yes, here not only is hope, but a promise. It's a promise, you know, and He'll lead you through this, and He'll bless you in ways you didn't even see coming or even thought were possible. But you have to keep your eyes on God. Don't put your attention all on the world and what it's throwing at you, because that's always a distraction. Just keep your eyes on God and just say, no matter what the world's doing, it's going to do it whether I'm
Yeah.
mad at it or happy with it or what.
Exactly.
You know, so you just keep
Exactly.
your eyes on God,
As
and then you just
important as
put
we
one
think
foot
we
in front of
are,
the
it's
other.
like, and by this I don't mean to minimize, because I do think that each individual person is important. But like you
Mm-hmm.
said, some things are going to happen regardless of um, what's going on with you or not. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like, yeah, you want to concentrate on yourself within, I mean, we don't live by ourselves, you don't want to cut off communication with the rest of humanity. But at the same time, really the only one that you are in control of is yourself and your actions.
That's right.
So
That's right.
and I think a lot of times people make the mistake of thinking that if let's say they believe that they're spiritually okay,
Mm-hmm.
whatever their belief system is, and by this I don't mean anything that's dark, that
Mm-hmm.
bad things don't happen, or you run into problems, or you run into stressful things, and it's like, that's, if you're here, this is going to be part of your life. But like you said, I think that hopefulness, that knowing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Some things are very stressful, like a couple of days. Some things, depending on what's going on, it could be a question of days, months, sometimes even years. But to know always that you're going to come out the other end and you're going to be okay.
Exactly. I mean, the world throws stuff at me constantly, at me and my husband, finances, this, that, the other thing, illnesses, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm going to be 70 this year, uh, and the thing is, if we put our attention on the world instead of God, we would find ourselves just overwhelmed in a minute.
Yes, I believe that.
Um, yeah, because I mean, there's just really no way around that. I mean, uh, I don't know. Over the years, there's been times where I got mad at God, or that I got rebellious, or
Of
that
course.
He and I kind of came to a complete misunderstanding of the terms because of me, not him.
Mm-hmm.
but you know, but God, God's very patient, and kind of leads me back, off my pity pot or wherever I'm at. You know, it helps me see the truth, see the light again, and realize that I just let the world distract me to the point where I just got uh, frustrated and angry and
Of
whatever.
course.
Um, that's the one thing. If you just I just keep my eyes on God and I put one foot in front of the other, and one day at a time. Sometimes
Absolutely.
down to 1 minute or 1 second at a time, depending on what I'm
Absolutely.
doing.
No, really, we do, even though sometimes, especially now in the thing, everybody wants to multitask. It's like,
Oh yeah,
stop. It's like, let's take it in a 24-hour increments. That's it. And put some sleep in there, by the way. Lots of
yeah,
sleep.
yeah. I mean, really, if I get too intense, if I'm out there working, I know that God will make sure I get the rest I need. He'll make sure I have the energy I need and the strength I need and everything else I need to do my job. When I come home, it's up to me to eat right. It's up to me to
Sure.
sleep right. It's up to me to watch what I do every day and how much I do and everything else if I want to stay on my feet and be of use to God. Uh, so yeah, I think we just have to kind of look, uh, at the heart of God and just know that that's that's the one anchor, you know, that will lead you back to home. It's kind of like following the North Star if you're in a boat,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just the one thing that keeps the rest of the ocean at, calm, and
Oh,
you get to sail through.
well, it's almost like it's almost like what's in your heart is between you and the divine, between you and God.
Mhm.
It's not what you do in front of people or when you've got an audience
No,
or you're, it's like,
no.
what do you do when nobody's watching, when there are no witnesses? Do you do the right
Yes,
thing?
absolutely true. You
Yeah.
know, I I tell people all the time, my reverendship, so to speak, is it's secular. It's just simply a legal protectionism situation for
Mm-hmm.
my clients. Um, even though it's a secular ordination, it's
Right.
legal in all 50 states. It keeps me from having to talk about the people I see or the things that where I go or
Right.
you know to protect them. But I'm not a minister per se, like a preacher. I'm not a
Mm-hmm.
preacher. But the one thing that I can always offer people is God's love,
Yeah.
because it's really God's love that's going to lead them out. It's God's love that gives us the authority to deal with the demons in the first place and the devil, and it's God's love that leads us out of the trouble that we find ourselves in. And we've all found ourselves there at one point or another,
Sure. Sure.
you know.
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a supernatural situation either.
mm-mm,
It's just
no,
living in, let's say, in today's world, there's lots of pitfalls that can trip up a person emotionally, psychologically, uh, mentally. There's a lot of things that sometimes, when, especially if you think that you don't see a solution, in other words,
yeah, yeah,
that kind of thing. Yeah, it's for all our technologies and advances, which I like a lot, by the way. There's also a lot of pitfalls that have come with it as far as what it does to the human psyche and emotions and everything that make us whole human beings.
exactly. Every day they discover new things in medicine. They discover new things here, there, whatever.
Hmm.
And when I was born in 1948, we didn't have a television. We
Yeah,
didn't get a TV till I was 12 years old.
yeah,
You know, so I mean, all of these different changes and things. Uh, you can fight. You live your world by fighting the world,
right,
and basically just spiral yourself right into a dark hole,
right.
or you can embrace what's going on in the world and just try to lift it up, you know, instead of letting it's just kind of like fighting the bully. You know
Right,
what I mean? It's
exactly.
like,
This is what where
yeah,
you're at. This is the moment you're
yeah,
living.
right,
Uh, and it is what it is.
yeah. That's why I just said I just keep my eyes on God and put one foot in front of the other.
Exactly.
you know. And if I need my website, I used to build websites, but I can't do it now because I can't possibly keep up with the technology.
No, that's the thing. Yeah, no,
Okay.
technology speeds right along. It's like sometimes
Yeah,
it's like, what? They're changing that again? It's like, are you kidding me? Yeah, I know. And let's face
yeah,
it, as humans beings, we're just just as by our nature, even the younger generations, by our nature, we're resistant to change. So I think that's why there's a lot of stressed out people walking around, even young
well,
people, for all that they're like onto everything. Yeah, there's sometimes so much change. I think is what stresses people out so much.
well,
But that's another show. Anyway,
I
Sonia,
asked,
thank you
I asked,
so much for spending this
you're
time.
welcome.
It has been absolutely wonderful. I love talking to you because your perspective, your experience, um, that story that you were telling about what happened with you in Juarez, that's like, I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I don't know, man. I think I would have been like, I think I'm going home now. I would have been out of there.
Trust me,
I don't want to
trust
do this
me.
anymore.
It's not that the thought didn't occur to me, Marlene. It did, but at the same time, I
I
knew
know, I know.
it
I'm that's why I'm saying it's like you're a brave lady
stop.
because I would have been like, what? And
Well,
people following me and oh my God, I forget. I would have been a nervous wreck.
Well, I tell you what, there was a lot of anxiety, and I have to say, but at the same time, it's like, you know, like my dad said, I'm just too stubborn to quit. I just,
Yeah, but still, I
I'm
mean, I'm
not gonna.
glad it had a good ending in the sense that you were able to do and see it through to
Yeah,
the end and everything. But still, God, that must have been like God. It's like I'm not, and I don't want to exaggerate because some people think of what you're describing as well. It was just metaphysical, and it's like that wasn't just metaphysical. That was dangerous in and of itself. But there's
it was.
another. It's
Yeah,
like these people were probably thinking, how are we going to get rid of her? We can't scare her
yes.
off. Oh my!
They tried poisoning me.
See what I mean?
Yeah, they tried that. I was brought a plate when we were finishing up and we were doing the blessing, and I was brought a plate, and this little kid came over and brought me this plate, and he said, "Well, Mom wanted you to have a plate. She wanted to fix it for you and everything." And I knew his mother was a bruja who is now with the other side, and I
Oh,
just told him, I said, "Well, thank you. Tell her thank you so much, but I'm just really not hungry." But I knew right away. I knew right away because you just it's that's where God comes in. Um, I saw him bringing the food up. I knew immediately that she had doctored it somehow, and I just thought, I'm not that hungry. I think I'll make it the rest of the day, and
yeah.
um, but yeah, that's the thing. God was on watch the whole time because otherwise I was starving. I probably would have eaten that food.
It was like, oh, it's like, but still, see, that's what I'm
but
saying. I'm saying
uh,
that there was an actual physical, real danger to you. That's the part I'm
mm,
talking about. Besides what was going on the metaphysical, spiritual level,
oh, truly,
okay,
yes.
there was actual physical danger for you, and
Oh,
that's the
yes,
part that I
definitely.
was like, I've been like, I would have been a real crybaby, is what I'm saying. I would have been
Well, I can tell you some of the private conversations that Todd and I had during that whole 10 days. You know, it was, when we were going to do the final blessing of not the final blessing, but the final of that 10 days there over the clinic, and a lot of the people showed up. I mean, there were hundreds of people there. I don't even know how many people. All I know is that a lot of them were the students of Francisco originally, and also students that had gone over to the other Brujo.
mm-hmm.
And Todd was sitting on Francisco's desk, and I was sitting in a chair in front of it. And I said, "What you looking at?" And he said, "All these Brujos and Brujos coming in here." He said, he just looked at me. He said, "I think we're the talk of the town, Sonia." He said, here we go, you know. And, you know, he and I just looked at each other for a minute, and both of us were thinking, if we'd have both known what was going to take place, would we have still come? We were actually thinking that in our heads. And
Yeah.
he looked at me, and we didn't even say it out loud. We were, at this point, we were like thinking each other's thoughts almost.
Yeah.
He just looked at me and he said, yeah, I had to come. And I said, me too. And he said, well, let's go finish it. And I said, okay. And we walked out the door.
Yeah, but
But I'll
still.
tell you, it was, yeah. And believe me, we thought it. We did, you know.
But okay, well, you know what? Like I said, I'm glad that had a happy ending and that it was resolved. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, hats off to you.
Well,
All right,
thank you
you were
very
very
much.
brave.
Um,
Sonia, again, thank you so much, and I want to wish you the best of luck. I hope you write that other book. I would love
well,
to bring you back on and we can discuss it because, oh my God, I can imagine you've got several books inside of you waiting to be written.
I do. I do. Yeah, I really do. There's, you know, and I've got one just of shorter cases and things that I've been working on too
Okay.
and stuff, you know. And so, yeah, there's a lot of things. I really need more time to write,
Yes,
you
that's the
know,
thing.
and
The
that
time.
would be nice.
Yeah. No, no, no. I believe me. I absolutely know where you're coming from. It's one of the things. It's like what you know what they say about good intentions, but yeah, the writing of a
Mhm.
book it can be time consuming. From
Well, if you're going to do it right, you
oh
betcha.
yeah,
You know,
absolutely, absolutely.
but I'll tell you, if it wouldn't have been for that Grammarly program to finish my book, I could have never finished it because every time I was trying to personally edit it, I got so emotionally involved, I
Hmm.
couldn't even. I just lost all sense of writing ability. But once I got the Grammarly program, I was able to sit back dispassionately and look at it and roll. But you know, that was you know that was what it took to finish, and I was really glad for that because then I didn't really have to feel it. I could just write it. You know, what I mean,
Yeah,
I
well,
could
you know,
edit
there's always a practical
cleanly.
aspect to it, but yeah, it's a especially when you're recounting something like what you know, what was
Uh,
inside that book.
uh, it just the memories alone were just overwhelming.
Okay, Sonia, so again, I want to wish you the best
Uh,
of luck. Again, thank you so much. It has been wonderful, wonderful, absolutely wonderful to speak to you.
well, come on your show, and I really appreciate it. And
No, absolutely. It was my pleasure. Totally my
uh,
pleasure. Thank you so much.
well, you take care of yourself and have a good time, and God bless and keep you safe.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you.
Bye
Okay,
bye.
bye bye.
Oh, wow. Let me tell you something. Talk about an engrossing story. You know what? If you saw this on a show, I think that's how. As a matter of fact, I was thinking when we were talking about that thing about supernatural, I'm thinking, you know, of course, Sam and Dean, they're nice looking young men that drive around in this great looking older automobile all over the United States. But in a way, Sony is kind of like a supernatural, but the real world supernatural. Think about it, okay? And you know, I'm glad you pointed out the obvious, which was a lot of people dabble in the paranormal or dabble calling themselves demonologists or dabble in the dark thinking that they could take it on and they really don't know what they're doing. They don't know. And I really do hope she writes the book about, I mean, not the one about the cases, other cases she's had, but about what's involved in this work. Because as you could tell, even when she was young and she had this calling, she had a really hard time finding a source of somebody that would guide her or just give her an answer, give her a straight answer. It wasn't until it sounds like she was a teenager that she kind of like moved in the right direction with it, or you know, had somebody that says, "Okay, I'm going to instruct you." And I wasn't kidding. I think that what would be great if she wrote that book would be not only to convince people if they're on the right track, but for others that have this, I don't know what they've got going on in their head, give them like a reality check and say, this is not what you think it is. And they might say, you're right. And coming from somebody like her with all these years and all these experiences, hopefully they'll say, you know what, this is not what I thought it was. Forget it. Not for me. Because this is not the type of work that you want to find out when you're right in the middle of it, that I don't want to do this anymore. It's not. And I've said this before in other shows. You know, there's a lot of things that can happen in the metaphysical or supernatural world that don't have to be totally malevolent or dark or demonic. But there's always a possibility. And she said it. You know, when you have a vortex or you have a person that's attracts ghosts or spirits or whatever you want to call it, it's almost like a beacon sometimes to demonic forces to find out what's going on with this person. Are they pure? Do they have the ability of connecting to the other side? And the reason I think that that happens is that they're hoping they're going to come across somebody that, number one, doesn't know how to protect themselves, or that they can fool, which is what they do. You know, you've heard a lot of these stories about people that uh, get into the Ouija board, which the Ouija board in and of itself is not the bad thing. It's people that sometimes have really good abilities, not knowing what they're doing, and then what they actually accept or invite in sometimes is they're unprepared to deal with it. And I think that's where she was saying that sometimes people that are surrounded sometimes by spirits that they might get, in other words, they get the attention that they really don't want. And that's what I'm saying. I hope she writes this book, because let me tell you something, that was a really good explanation about what can happen um, to somebody that gets involved with this. And also, what she was talking about, those masks. Yeah, and I said, as a matter of fact, in the previous show to this one, about black magic that's done to bind souls to objects, that can be done. That's exactly what she was describing, where he had gone to all these different countries and different religious beliefs where they had exactly done that. Okay, they had exactly done that. They had bound a soul into that object, into that mask. And a lot of times they use it for divination. They use it sometimes to be used against an enemy. I mean, there's a lot of different things. But ultimately, what you're talking about is you're binding a human soul to be out of the presence of God, of the divine. And I think that's the worst thing that one human being can do, on purpose, by the way. If you have a soul that's lost their way between the transition from the death of their body into ascending and going into the presence of the divine, that you take advantage of this soul. Or sometimes the soul, those are dead, but they got things going on that haven't worked out yet. Whatever the reason, okay, that does happen, and I'm glad she brought that up, because a lot of people don't think that that is done, but it can be done. So anyway, I thought that was a super interesting. I know it's been a long interview, but wow, believe me, this was a real eye opener for anybody out there uh, that is interested in this or wants to know more about it, or the reality of it. Pick up her book. You know, visit her website. I've got the link. It's going to be um, on the credits of the show. But just in case, because I forgot to ask her, it's www.getridofghosts.com. That's Sonia's website. If you want to visit her website, that's how you go about it. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for viewing. Subscribe to my channel or the podcast, however it is that you're listening or seeing this show, so that you get notified when I release a new show. My true believers, please do not forget to go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com, go to the Submit Your Story tab, and I want to hear about your story. I really do, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be long, it can be short, it could be a bunch of them. Just go ahead and get a hold of me, and we'll figure out how you can relay those stories to me. Catch me on Facebook and on Twitter. I use Periscope to live stream on Twitter. And I, again, I want to thank you so much for coming back and watching all these shows. And believe me, I've got a lot of fantastic, wonderful guests, a lot of fantastic, interesting shows coming up, which I know that you're going to love. But in the meantime, till the next time, take care. You were wonderful. See ya.